remember to chat if you need to get a hold of me because I don't have everyone on the same screen. Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Roll call.
Oh, for me, Director Jackman,
Good morning, I'm here.
Director Tierney, Director Vandenberg,
I'm here, thanks.
Director Graham,
Present.
Director Cunningham,
He's coming online.
He's on, I think his number's here. Hans, are you there?
Nope, that's not his,
That's not his number? Okay.
unless he's going on specs.
Director Papa,
I'm present.
Director Davidoff,
Present, thank you.
Director Hanegraaff,
Here,
Director Weatherhead,
Here, thank you.
Can I interject? Director Newell was missed and I want to mute.
oh, I haven't gotten to you yet.
Oh, I thought it was alphabetical. Okay.
Oh, Director McFadden,
Here.
thank you. Director Boone,
Present, and Director Newell, if it was alphabetical, I would have had to chime in earlier.
Director Hewitt,
I am present. Good morning.
morning. Director McLaren, I'm going to mispronounce this.
That's okay. McLaren Cole, I'm here.
McLaren Code, thank you. Director Page,
Present.
Director Lockwood, Director Main,
I'm present. Good morning.
good morning. Director Lund,
I've not seen her, so I don't think she's on there.
thank you. Director Watson,
She's here.
I'm present, thanks.
and Director Casley.
Alternate Director Fike in place of Director Casley.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everyone.
God, Newell.
Oh, forget you, Tom? Are you there? Are we sure you're there? Okay, good.
Twice now.
Great. Okay, call meeting to order. We're starting a little bit late at 9:10. Sorry about that. We still haven't figured out our technical difficulties, but we think we'll be okay to continue on. I don't believe we have anyone from the rec commissions that isn't a director. If I'm wrong, can you speak up right now? And we just want to make sure to take a motion for freedom of the floor if you're here. Okay, great. We'll start with the traditional lands acknowledgement. We acknowledge and respect the Indigenous peoples with whom's traditional lands we are meeting today. Adoption of the agenda.
So, Jackman.
Okay, any discussion? No? Okay, all those in favor? Good. Opposed? No one? Great.
Chair,
Yeah.
didn't Commissioner DeBoon want something? Is it on the, I didn't see it on the e-scribe, so.
He discussed it with staff, and because staff aren't prepped for it, we're gonna make sure that the report comes to the next rec commission meeting.
It sounded interesting. I wouldn't mind just even, could we know what he's talking about? Is that possible? Just a synopsis?
I would prefer not, because it opens up a whole, everyone having opinions and conversation
No.
around something that staff
just
may
wanna
not
know-
be prepped for.
No, I just want to know what he means. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah, do you,
If you want, I can give a general,
sure, yeah.
if they want to
Okay.
add it to the agenda.
Sure. I'll move over to Joe. Joe can give you a quick synopsis.
Through the chair, there was an issue with the swim club in Creston. In general, I don't know what the full piece is. I've let Director Doonan know that they can reach out and speak to me, but it seems like it was about their feeling that their fees are getting too high. When I looked across all the clubs in the region, their fees are either the lowest or right where other fees are. So all the clubs are pretty much charging the exact same thing. And so I've sent the link, if you guys would like, I can send you the link to where all the clubs in the region have it. You can actually see the fees, right in that club link.
Director DeBoon, am I correct in that you were comfortable with the answer and didn't need?
Well, that's the first I heard of them because I had a discussion with Joe, and I'm willing to accept the staff report. But my point really is not so much the height of the fees is a concern. The direction they're going is a bigger concern. And the person expressed to me the reality that they may be priced out of existence for participating in all the different sports when you consider hockey, soccer, swimming, and it is a concern. And I think we have to recognize it as perhaps a desire to basically plateau our fees or not keep increasing them because of these concerns. And with all the other inflationary pressures families have, we are facing the possibility that we may be pricing them out of participation. And that was what it was expressed to me. And I said I would bring it to the All Rec committee because we are having that meeting today. So I would like a further conversation and perhaps a staff report. And again, maybe the fees are considered acceptable. The rate of increase is perhaps more of a concern. So that's kind of my summary of it.
Joe, do you need direction to put that onto our next all right?
I think it's best for because really it's a question for the whole committee whether they want that.
So Director Graboon, do you want to make a motion that you would like that to come back to next all right?
The right point of process.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, you should probably finish adopting the agenda and just take it as a notice of motion towards the end of the agenda.
Great, we can do that.
And I'm fine with that.
Okay. I'll put you as in between not 8 and 10 to put a notice of motion there, okay? I'll come back to you, Director Boone.
Thank you.
Yep. Great, okay. Adoption of the agenda with that provision? Okay, seconder? Great, all those in favor? Great, moving on. Receipt of the minutes, the March 27, 2024 All Rec Commission minutes. Anyone have any errors, omissions, discussion? No? Okay. Moving on to staff reports. 7.1. Over to, is it Carrie? No? Oh, okay, hi.
To me?
They're pointing towards you, so I'm thinking yes. Welcome, over to you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Just a very brief report, but today marks the last day of the public survey for the Parks, Trails, and Water Access Strategy. So we've had open an public engagement process since about mid-May. And we've been using the Engage RDCK platform. So that's a page that's linked right off of the RDCK website, and it's the new portal for all public engagement. So I encourage everyone to check that out. That Engage RDCK website has hosted the public survey, and it's hosted an interactive map. So we're closing on the public survey today. In the report, I have about 500, just over 500 completed surveys, but it's my understanding now we're just over 700 for the completed surveys. We have about a 41% completion rate on the survey, which is quite good according to our consultant. There is some survey fatigue that does happen, but it's happening at the very beginning of the survey. So people are clicking on it and perhaps just not interested in it. So there is a little bit of survey fatigue. It is a hard survey. We have heard comments back on that. And, but I've been assured from our consultant that it's leading to very good answers. So people are having to put in the time to do it, and the results are looking good. We've got a respondent from all areas, really strong representation happening in the Creston ABC area where there are actually no regional parks. So that's very exciting to hear new ideas from those areas, as well as other areas are popular as well. So the closing of the public surveys today, and the closing of the other tools we've been using. So we did roving kiosks, that's sort of a pop-up poster boards of the process and engaging with people at rec centers. That process was very successful. And then the other mechanism we used was what's called sounding boards. It's just a big board that you can write a comment on. So those have been placed across the regional district at our key facilities, and those are getting some pretty interesting comments on them. We have one outside our office, and it's, every day there's a couple comments added. So that's working quite well. And just the next step is to wrap up. All of these comments will be wrapped up into a what we heard report, and that will be presented back to all rec and also the working group that's guiding this project. And the other report that's coming forward at the same time will be the assessment. So it's a scan across our park system, all the background information and knowledge about our parks. So you'll be getting a what we heard, you'll be getting a full assessment report, and that should be coming within the next month or so. We have engagement going out this week to First Nations. So we're using the consultative areas database and sending a letter out to First Nations asking how they would like to participate, what works best for them. So that's happening. And we're excited to close this phase 1 public side of the survey. The phase 2 will be taking those findings back and sharing them back with the public. So there'll be a second chance for the public to comment on that information. And I welcome any questions about the strategy, and encourage you to share anything you've heard during the process, positive or negative. We'd love to hear it all.
Great. Director Papa.
Yeah, thank you. To the chair. Looks like we've got fairly good results. You've answered most of my questions that I had, except one. When you produce your final report, are you going to do it by park or just an overall summary?
It will be an overall summary. There were some questions specific, like there was a question on what park do you frequent the most, or what have you visited? So we'll have some data specific to parks, but the questions in the survey are a bit more general. They're not specific to issues in the 27 regional parks.
Supplemental, if I may. Thank you, Mark. Looking at it, I'd probably take it offline if I asked you questions about specific parts and Area H. Would that be okay?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks. Director Watson.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. A couple of questions. So you did mention the timeline of the phases, but I didn't quite get enough specifics. What I'm really looking for is with the First Nations engagement, we're just sending them a letter now asking how they want to be engaged. So my first question is, how does that get incorporated into your final report on what we heard? If that's coming back, I think you said in the next month or two. So curious how the First Nations engagement works into the what we heard report. It doesn't sound like enough time. And then my second one, I'll just give it to you all at once, is that I will note that 40% of the people attempting to do the survey did not complete it. And while 500 responses is pretty good, we missed another 230. And there were quite a bit of comments on Facebook indicating that the survey was not user-friendly, and it was a bit of a difficult one. I won't get into why it's all on there, but I think it merits reevaluating what we're doing in this engagement process and all of our engagement processes when people want to engage, but then they stop. So something's happening there, and I think it's important to try and figure out what that is. So those are my two questions.
For staff?
Yeah, for your first question, the First Nations engagement the period of time will be until September. The consultant is anticipating just having a longer period of time, which is more suitable for that engagement. So we'll do a attachment to what we heard as that information comes in. The second point regarding survey fatigue, yeah, there's a certain, like the completion rate at this point is 41%, which is consistent with other public surveys that have been done. It is a long survey and we're asking for a lot of information. So certainly next time, if there's comments or there's a shorter survey form that you would like, we can do that. We have sent out a survey specific to stakeholder groups that's more targeted. So we do expect that to be successful as well. But yeah, survey fatigue is part of the process. And every time we do one, I think there's the ability to learn and adapt and try to make the next one more successful. But thank you for your comments.
Yes, Sarah, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing to the chair. We understood that the survey was going to be quite comprehensive and long. I think our comments to the consultants back were also recognizing that. So that is also why we offered an interactive map as an option for people to share their thoughts there as well as the roving kiosks and the sounding board. So we did our best to try to offer many things, knowing that a survey may not be for everybody to fill out. So there was the other options for those people that found it very difficult to fill out that survey, to put a point on the map or talk to somebody at a rec center or to write it down on one of our sounding boards. So we tried to offer different avenues as well, knowing that it could be long for some people.
Supplemental?
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. So on the survey component, appreciate the extra effort into finding ways to do that. I don't necessarily think it's fatigue as much as it is. I know we're trying to get a lot of detail, but we need to figure out a way to simplify because it just pushes people out of engaging. So just some constructive feedback. There's no discount to what you're doing. It's just we always have to evolve it. But to the second point regarding the First Nations, I'm not quite comfortable with their engagement simply being an attachment to what we heard. Parkland is actually one of the most strategic places to work in reconciliation. It is unceded territory across the region. And so I feel like that First Nations component being after what we heard and as an attachment is I just don't feel good with that process. I feel like it needs to be incorporated into the whole what we heard. And depending on what they say, I think they might come back and say there's other ways they want to do this in terms of engagement. Also, by September, knowing the capacity of some of them, that might be too quick of a turnaround. So it doesn't necessarily make life easier for you. I'm not trying to make it difficult, but I think this is an important place where reconciliation is really a huge opportunity to deep dive into what these public lands are best used for and whatnot in all the context.
For staff, is there some flexibility in that process? I think is what.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason why there's a longer period of time is exactly the point, to try to give the ability for First Nations to have time to be able to respond to us and say what works for them in terms of engagement. I wouldn't, maybe the term attachment is incorrect. I think the point is that we truly want those comments to stand out on their own and not be dissolved into public comments. So I think it's a matter of, we're probably talking the same thing here. We feel that this is a way to actually bring those comments more comprehensively together so that we can truly understand the First Nations perspective. So we can change our terminology or perhaps timing, perhaps to satisfy you.
Great, thanks. I'm just going to make sure you notice Director Cunningham joined the meeting. And Councillor Tate from City Council recognition. Thank you. Over to Director Lockwood.
Thank you. Question and one comment. So my question would be, was the engagement only at the three major, so Castlegar, Crescent, and Nelson rec centers?
The roving kiosks that went to the major rec centers, and then it was actually a very challenging 3 days that BJ was here. It was pouring rain. So we did have outside, like outdoor engagement plans. So I believe she visited the local parks around this area. The rail trail was very successful. Do you recall, Rail?
No, because we tried many of places. So I'm only thinking of the ones that we tried to get.
The most success we did have was the outdoor location was the rail trail, and I know those rec centers we did walk away from this experience going, wow, our rec centers are awesome points of engagement, perhaps for other services of the regional district, because we got considerable traffic through. Tricia had a comment for not specific to the roving kiosks, but the sounding boards were up around the time of grad. So as our facilities are peaking in terms of people moving through them, they're really opportune times to get public engagement back. So yeah, we can't hit it all, but we are seeing very similar themes across the sounding boards, the comments for the roving kiosks, and the survey. So we do think we're getting we're hearing the same thing.
So I just want to, is that we're heavily weighted to those three areas. And so that it doesn't show what might be out in Area K and stuff like that. So as a feedback, going forward in something like this, I think that we need to, I get that we can't go, it's kind of like we can't have a hospital in every little community, but even having something at individual little rec centers that they can engage on their own with those kind of things, that it's not staff, but something like that. The survey itself, I just did it last night because I wanted to make sure I did it before this meeting. There was way more than survey fatigue. It was so confusing because for me, being tired and I was like, okay, are we talking about parks? Are we talking about trails? Are we talking about water access? Like I had to keep going back, where if we would have separated and maybe people that just use parks would just have done that, and we maybe would have engaged more with people that maybe that's all they do use is water. And so that's just comment back on that big survey. I still did every single question, but it might be a way of getting more people engaged from other areas, smaller areas.
We're going to take pause. I'm just going to do a vote for freedom of the floor just in case Councillor Tate has anything she wants to add. So can I take a motion for freedom of the floor for, thank you, Keith, and seconded by Diana. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Excellent. Okay. And just noting online, if you have a question, please put your name in chat. I don't see, thank you, Chair Watson, for letting me know. I don't see hands on your screen, so I can't see everyone's screen. I do have Director DeBoon though. Okay, moving on to Director Weatherhead.
Thank you, through the chair, not to divert away from this conversation, but when I have my Area K residents commenting on boat launches on the Arrow Lakes and making those complaints, how do we, are we able to communicate back to them what their needs are and what they're asking in here to, make them aware that this is not part of the regional parks. So, I mean, I think they realize that by looking at the comments, but I'm just wondering if there's any tool to comment back to them that, it's something that maybe I myself could look into.
Yeah, through the chair, it's a very good question. The mechanism we have to is when we do the what we heard report, we do anticipate, given the broad scope of parks, trails, and water access, it means different things to different people. That those pieces that are completely outside of the regional district scope will be summarized, and then we have talked about forwarding that information to the agencies that may be responsible. So, for example, if it's on the Arrow Lakes, perhaps that's the Comptroller of Water or a regulatory agency responsible. It could be Hydro, it could be Fortis if it's other lakes. So we will be forwarding information off. In terms of closure to the public, that will be a public-facing document, the What We Heard report. So if we do it right within that, it will be there. Unfortunately, we just can't engage in the comments back. So there won't be like a social media type commenting back on any of those posts on the interactive map. It's something if you think it's something we should do, we could probably figure out a way, but it would be quite intensive in terms of staff time. Hoping that What We Heard report approach will be satisfactory to you.
Thank you. Yes, that's kind of along the lines that I expected, and I doubt that these very people would go back and look in this interactive map to see if they gained an answer from this. So thanks for your explanation of matters, and hopefully we can be working on some of these boat launches through BC Hydro. Thank you.
Dr. Haga.
Okay, so the survey's long, I get that. I think, for my area anyway, the timing of it was kind of unfortunate. And I think it is fatigue between the curbside referendum and then reimagining rec. And this week we got a card in the mail, or maybe it was last week, saying we need your help and we want your input. And then I heard at our last rec commission meeting that people coming into the Castle Park complex were kind of avoiding the kiosks. Don't ask me any other questions, but told you all what I was going to tell you, right? And so I think it's unfortunate because I would have liked to have seen a larger sampling of people. I'm sure it's representative of the overall population, but I do think more is better. And that's nobody's fault. None of this is anybody's fault, but I really do think that people are kind of sick and tired of us really asking them for their input. And yet people do want to give input. So I don't know how you square that circle, but I think had we finished with reimagining rec before we moved into this, people would have been more welcoming in Castle Park than apparently they were. So it's just kind of unfortunate, in my opinion.
These are fair points. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of new ways that we're working too. Like this Engage platform opens up new possibilities. So it will, there's a lot of potential there for enhanced public engagement, and I think we've used more traditional mechanisms before. Mail-outs or direct delivery. So it is using Facebook, and you see these things across all platforms now. And it is a bit bombarding. At the same time, we've had, Sarah can speak to it, but the Facebook post, like a $200 advertisement on Facebook, was very far reaching. So we gotta be careful of our successes, I guess, as we move forward.
Just supplemental, I will say that I think people are when there's kind of two things sort of on the same subject going on at the same time, it's hard to tell which Facebook post is about which survey and all of that. I think some of that happens.
And at Talent Creston, a great example, they're doing a park strategy at the moment as well. So they have public engagement, posters, stakeholder meetings going on right now as well. So it is, I hear you, there's a lot that we're asking for.
Tricia?
Thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to build on something that Mark mentioned as well, and certainly to talk to what Director Hendergraff is talking about, is as staff, we just talked about this yesterday as we've started to see some of the comments, especially the ones that are really visible to us right now through like the sounding boards of going, we want, because we have two different consulting teams with the same agency working on these projects, is to ask them to converge and say, how are they going to share information that's coming out of, say, the Castlegar Reimagining project. You can see on the sounding board already, there's direct information that actually feeds into the Parks, Trails and Water Access project to say, how can we take the, you know, the ask of the residents and use it in a way that we can channel it to where we think is most effective based on what the comments are. And that would be, and I can speak to the city, the Castlegar engagement project right now, because there's even information that would go back to the city of Castlegar that is specific to things that they oversee that actually doesn't have anything really to do with the regional district. But it's to say, okay, if we're asking residents, how can we at minimum take their information and send it out as broadly as possible to use it to everybody's planning benefit.
Great. Moving on to, I'm going to go first time speakers first, then I'll come back to second. Director Jackman.
Great, thank you. Just wanted a couple observations because I appreciate that this is obviously a successful engagement, but it's very limited, that the people who provided their input are not representative of ratepayers as a whole. If you see them at rec centers or trails, are the people who are probably saying, let's have more rec center expansion and lower fees and more trails. So I'd be curious to see what happens in the fall if we can get some other way to get people to tune into a more universal portal, not specific to services, maybe ask a couple of easy questions. Do you know what your neighbors have told us about recreation? Are you up to date on pending issues affecting property taxation arising from this or other things your neighbors have told us? And if you think you want to know more about it, post your email here and we'll keep you up to date. Because none of these surveys are representative of taxpayers. And when we get to the next topic, and we look at the big picture on money and rec, there's some contradictions there between what I've heard. So anyway, let's evolve this into a portal that is more general and that draws more people in with a few very short questions, maybe 3 at a time.
Yeah, Joe?
You know, through the chair, it's interesting. It's a great comment, Director Jackman. With I think the directors and the commissioners that are around the table from the Castlegar piece know it's a really tough connection trying to bring the property tax implications of something that might possibly happen and try to give context around that. So, you know, I think what this again points to is that we are a complex organization. We still, whether it's engagement, we do it in silos. We don't have an overall regional district plan for it to try and figure out how do you piece those pieces of information together. So, you know, I think as a board, you may want to identify that. So for example, the project that was actually prioritized for this year was this project. It wasn't Castlegar engagement and it wasn't Nelson engagement. This project has been in the queue for thanks. Mark said 8 years. So 8 years we've been working on the background information so that we didn't have to pay a consultant $300,000. Like Mark's been Mark's been presenting over the last number of years of all the background information that we've gathered in order to get us to this point. But I completely agree, that we need to somehow find out how we piece these whole things together. We completely understand it. We did meetings? Was it five?
Seven.
Sorry, I didn't want to go too.
5 in area I.
Yeah, 5 in area. Sorry, I didn't want to go too much, but we did 7 public meetings in the in our Castlegar IJ process, and I can tell you the comments are wide and varied. And so agree completely. It is a real struggle to understand that. And, you know, I think there is a coordination issue. That's definitely clear to me. But it's also just, it has to be that the board through to us and then out to the public through the engagement. That all has to be in alignment, or else it can get really disjointed. But thank you. I agree completely, Gary. It's very hard to piece those two things together.
You good, Director Jackman?
Yeah, wait till we get to the next item.
Excellent. I'll just keep you on mute. Director Naboon.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to give a shout out to staff for all that they're doing, because it is a complex subject and requires a lot of input in different ways. When I completed the survey, though, I found it somewhat skewed to existing parks and trying to determine the best use of these existing parks, and not so much for the acquisition of parks. And as you know, that's probably the biggest issue in this area. The interactive map is useful, and it probably tells you loud and clear what people here want. But I'm just a bit concerned about how the survey was set up. I don't think it clearly assists in land acquisition and finding use as much as it does for the existing areas. And so I know you've heard the message loud and clear that we don't have RDCK water access or parks here, and we're not the only area in the Kootenays or in central Kootenays that still has concerns this way. But I'm just wondering how you probably have to separate follow-up on existing parks and best use and acquisition, and I'm wondering if you have a plan to address that.
Joe?
Well, through the chair, I think when we see the results and we try to see everything together. So, for example, I think one of the particular strategies about the interactive maps, one of the particular strategies which the proposal piece. So if you remember, proposal is at the March already, and then at the April board meeting, the board gave us permission to enter into an agreement with through TransCanada Trails into proposal to get usage data across points. I think when we see it all together, it will actually give us a flavor. So, for example, I thought that we particularly knew that the interactive map would point out the places that were not. But I think on the higher level to remember that the goal of this project is not so much to identify a particular piece of property or a particular thing, is to try to identify what is the public saying and all of this information that we can build policy around so that we can enable, know whether something is something that we should consider or something that we shouldn't consider, how we might fund something. All of those pieces are the things that we're going to try and garner out of this. So I think it's a little bit of a higher level than just knowing what the next project is going to be, because as we know around this table, the next project can come to us very quickly. We can get lightning strikes of political community saying, you have to do this. In fact, we just sent something out to the Castlegar Commission just this week on a potential lightning strike. good one. But just, I think we're going to find these commonalities that we can then know that, yeah, this fits into a regional park model, or a regional trail model, or a water access model. I think we have to wait for that information to come back. And, you know, like, I think no matter what, like, to Arnold's comment about specific things, we're going to get those in those specific conversations at those tables. That's where we've seen it, whether it be a letter writing campaign from Crestova, or other issues that have come up. So we do get those pieces in that manner. So I don't think like the intent of this is necessarily to know the next part.
Yeah, through the chair, I think too, that sometimes, like, part of the plan will be recommendations and implementation actions that need to happen. And I think we could probably say a good one for Creston ABC is probably some sort of an acquisition strategy. I would think is going to be a theme that comes through. You need some mechanism to figure out how you're prioritizing your acquisitions. Is it water access that's preferred, or trails, or what have you? So that, I think that's work to be done in the future. And the summary of the Parks Trails engagement that we're hearing now, I do have a feeling it's going to lead to more targeted work, especially in those areas that don't have any regional parks. So that's sort of like you're one step ahead of us, Arnold, and we may be coming to your community to ask more targeted language about those acquisition strategies, or how do we fund trails, or what. We'll get there.
Good, Director Dubin? Okay, moving on, Director Graham.
Thank you, and through the chair to staff, like, really nice job here on getting lots of work done. My question is really more around these next steps where we say we've got, oops, my computer over here died. RCS Plus to send survey to user groups. I'm wondering, like, is that the same survey? Is it a different survey? Like, which user groups? I think it would have been helpful for me to have a little bit of information in this report about what that means. And the same with the key partners. I think I'm just wondering if we are targeting areas that had lower sort of input so far in this part of the next steps. And maybe I'll just stop there.
Mark?
Yeah, through the chair. So the targeted interviews with key partners, there's 5 to 7 targeted interviews that the consultant's able to do. So we can provide a list following this meeting of those stakeholders, but they're stakeholders ranging from rec sites and trails BC to Kootenai Conservation Program, broad spectrum across park values. The email that's, or the user group survey that's going out, we've had to narrow it down to about 30, I believe, groups that we believe are representative across the district. And that's a shorter form survey than what we've done already. And the questions are more targeted to the needs and preferences of user groups. So we can share, following this meeting, I can share all of that information. We are limited, like, we cannot hit everyone. If we do a list of our stakeholders, we have easily 200 stakeholders across environmental values, cultural values, recreation, trails, right into sports teams. So we've had to do a bit of trimming in terms of targeting those groups, and we can share that information. If it's not sufficient enough for you, we can do more key stakeholder interviews, and we can expand that targeted survey to user groups, but it will cost more money. Like, we have a fixed budget for this, and every one of those interviews with a stakeholder group is arranging, 3 to 5 people to set up on one day to meet online, which requires preparation by our consultant, the interview and summary. So we can do more and more, but it will come at additional cost. But we can certainly share what the work we're doing with you following the meeting.
Director Graham, do you have a follow-up?
Thank you. So supplemental, just one thing, and that would be great, Mark, if you could provide that information so we could just kind of see, where these groups are, who they are. I think that would definitely be helpful to myself. I'm just wondering if we're engaging at all with any of the high schools. These are the future users of these systems, or if that is just not completely off the list here.
Good question. I believe the only engagement we're doing with education is with the soccer college. We don't have stakeholders identified within the high school. If that's important to you, we can just welcome to discuss that. I think it's important as well, but it's a matter of we have 5 to 7 of these interviews across the entire district.
Good, Director Graham?
Thank you. Like I say, just going back to if we could see the list, I think without seeing the list, okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Director Popoff for a second time.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question has been asked by more than one director, and staff has provided the response that I was looking for. Thank you.
Great, not saying anything else, I'll give a couple of my thoughts. This is no slight on the survey nor staff, but 700 people out of 60,000, even if we got 700 out of 60,000, it's statistically nothing, to make decisions based on. And so I struggle with that. I think Director Jackman said something similar, it's a struggle to figure out what to do with that, because although it seems like a lot, it's really, on the average taxpayer, it's really nothing. And so I don't know how you do that better. I'm seeing the same thing. It's difficult. So it's nothing to do with how you've done the process. It's literally just people aren't engaged, and we need to figure out what that looks like. So I guess my only thought is some of the strategies I've seen work and we've used them in the city is sending those specifically to those captured community groupings. So when we had, CAPSCAR OCP, which is different, I know, than a parks thing, but sending it to a Chamber of Commerce who has their own emailing list, say, hey, we're doing this, we really want to get feedback. Can you send this out? Sending it to School District 20 or something and seeing if they're willing to partner and say, hey, we can send this to every parent in the whole school district. They already have those compiled email lists. So it's not extra work necessarily on staff side. Once we compile that list for every engagement we're doing, if we can compile lists within our region that have captured already a whole bunch of homes or a whole bunch of stakeholders, that might be a way to leverage getting more input. So just a thought for staff to look at. There's a lot of seniors groups, that already capture all the seniors. There's a lot of, and they already have people's email addresses. So if we can compile a list of all of those and use us as directors, say, hey, why don't you send in any of the groups in your area? And we can send, hey, this is the list of all the ones we have in our area. Now you can just send that to all of them, and it becomes a part of our engagement process. Just my thoughts on it, because I do struggle with the 700 for 60,000, which is 1.3% of the whole stakeholder, and that doesn't seem statistically enough to make decisions based on. So I don't know what to do with that. Again, no slight on staff at all, because I think you guys have done a great process. Just not sure how a decision maker what we do with that. Great. And I don't see anyone else. So we're going to move on to 7.2, Recreation Asset Management Progress Update Report. And is this correct? Okay.
Through the chair, I'll share my screen, Chair.
Great, thank you.
This one. And can you see a presentation, Chair?
Yeah, we can see it. Thanks.
Thanks. Good morning. And respectfully, through the chair, I have an update on 2 regional asset management projects and a quick review of ongoing asset management work happening in recreation. Currently, there are 2 regional projects with the goals of assessing RDCK practices and policies related to asset management and sustainability. Community services are engaged and vested partners in both of those projects, and so we've had key staff at the steering and the initial stages of those projects, including procurement, consultant selection, etc. And so now we're moving. The AMP, which is the asset management project, was delayed due to the consultant losing key staff in 2023. Now it's in full motion. And the greenhouse gas reduction feasibility study, funded 80% by FCM, was awarded in early 2024 and has kicked off. And I'll give you a little bit more detail on both of those. The AMP, the asset management project, we've hired Roth IAMS, and the IAMS is an acronym, and it means Infrastructure Asset Management Strategies. And so they were hired in 2023, and they were the firm that completed the majority of the facility condition assessments leading up to 2023. So they have some good continuity, and they have currently the most accurate information that we have about our assets in regionally. So far as we've met as a steering committee, and there have also been meetings with internal stakeholders and managers in all departments to move this one along. And Roth IAMS employ the SMART 2.0 framework, which we've seen applied with the water department's asset management planning. And so the diagram on the right shows that framework, and that will inform the decisions, the recommendations they come to staff and the board during their report at the fourth quarter in 2024. The other project on the go is the greenhouse gas reduction feasibility study, which is being led by the senior energy specialist. And this will inform asset management decisions in order for us to meet our 2030 and 2050 emission reduction goals. Building Energy Solutions was selected as the contractor. They're connected to additional funding through Fortis mostly that impacts us, and I think also a little bit through BC Hydro. And that may inform future decisions about how and when and where to invest capital funding related to meeting those greenhouse gas reduction goals. And as a bonus, and I think that this is a report coming to the board potentially in the July board meeting, there could be additional funding for enhanced scope of this project through Fortis's corporate program funding. And I believe Sherry Amato will be bringing that report to the board. And there could be a conversation, this is really interesting, could be a conversation related to renewable natural gas as part of that formula. And I don't want to get controversial, but that may be tied to some of the funding, but Sherry will outline that in her report in July. So current market conditions for asset management in our portfolio, in recreation specifically, the values of our assets are increasing without any effort on our part. And what I mean by that is the replacement costs for a multiplex have escalated rapidly based on data that, anecdotal data from staff's experience at other municipalities, ranging from 50 to 85 million. And even the sum of the parts for a new or expanded recreation facility could be up to $150 million. And so it's important to know, obviously, the value of replacement for asset management planning and also for determining adequate insurance premiums, which can be challenging. Project costing is a moving target. Estimates from consultants have lead to the budget creation, and in some cases it's sufficient, and in some cases it isn't. One recent tender came back on the Castlegar roof coating project, where bids were less than half of what we expected, which is good news. But we'd like to be able to plan more effectively, and so we're exploring how to make better estimates, and that takes more time in planning, but it allows us to be more precise or accurate, with our budgeting. And on more than one project, contractor availability, capacity, and capability have led to efficiencies and cost savings, which is good. We're getting good value out of our money, but on at least two projects from 2023, the lack of availability, capacity, and capability of the contractors has led to delays and increased project risks, and even loss of service delivery in one particular situation. And interest rates and inflation are leveling out somewhat. So the capital requirements and the premiums on borrowing capital are looking slightly better than it was in 2023. This slide is an example of how planning can change quickly based on information that we have available. The written report on the agenda for this meeting that I submitted at the March meeting has more detail on this particular issue related to the Castlegar complex. But inside of the facility condition assessments and recommendations to spend, there were recommendations to spend additional money on consultants and engineers for further study and investigation. For example, in Nelson, they recommended we study more of the mechanical systems, we study more of the building envelope systems, etc. In the Castlegar complex, there was a recommendation to do more study on the roof. And we actually, as staff, knew that the roof, some of the flat roofs needed more investigation. So in late 2023, we hired a consultant to do an assessment, and they came back for the $8,000 it cost for the assessment. They came back with more than $4 million in additional roof repair that needed to be done. And so the top line of this table shows the initial 5-year plan for capital for those two services combined. And the next line shows the enhanced capital plan with about a $3.2 million increase just from one study. And so that really throws our long-term planning into a bit of it skews it a bit so that we have to be a little bit more nimble and we have to react a little bit more effectively when we go to budget. I'll move on to the next slide. A couple of updates for some of the major projects we're working on. In Creston, the pool roof repair will be completed in the next couple of weeks. That was one of the projects that came in under budget, so we're happy to work with that contractor. The East Stairwell project that started in 2022 is currently on hold, and that 20% status on that table is actually we have a quantity of steel, and we still don't have a tender out for completing that project based on the fact that the relationship with that contractor didn't go so well. In Nelson, the boiler project, the boiler replacement project was scheduled for January, has been moved to August. And that's actually better for us because we do have a 2-week shutdown in August, and so we don't have to close the pool unnecessarily. And again, lucky for us, the contractor is understanding and there's no cost escalation due to the delay. And in Castlegar, we awarded the contract to put a new coating on the arena roof. That tender came back well below budget, and so now we're also exploring doing the insulation project, which was deferred this year based on the estimates. And so we're hoping that we can potentially shoehorn that into before the end of the season. In Salmo, the pool project was a challenge for the project management team and for recreation staff and operations staff. We lost the full season last year due to the equipment sourcing issues and other factors we anticipated. And I should point out, of course, for the public, losing that whole season was the biggest detriment. And we anticipated being opening on time this spring, but again, due to some of the other challenges I've already mentioned, we recognized that it was better for us to get this project to 95% complete and then finish it ourselves. So we're currently, the pool is open, and just with that last little 1% of commissioning and troubleshooting, that pool is operating. So we're happy to see that. And just in Ryandale, there's currently a contractor on the roof at the Curling Club Lounge, and so that's another small scale project that we're moving forward on. And as I mentioned, the deeper look at our facility condition assessments and the recommendations coming from the two regional projects will inform our planning, and staff will bring those capital plans to the commissions and committees in the board for approval in the future. And I'll take any questions and I'll stop sharing.
Great. Thank you very much, Craig. I have Director Jackman.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, thanks, Craig, because this is necessary information. It's order of magnitude of what we have to focus on well before the 2025 budget. So a couple observations. Maybe a combined $80 million replacement for the three major complexes. It's probably much, much higher, as you also allude to. But say you were responsibly just keeping 1.5% of the capital cost, adding to your reserve every year. That would mean you should be putting aside, say, $1.2 million a year. 2024 budget, we actually reduced the combined capital reserves for those three major sites by $480,000. The only one that went up in terms of reserve or is projected to go up is Creston. The other two major complexes, Nelson and Castlegar, are draining the reserves rapidly. So we're digging a deeper hole. If you were to look at our taxation currently is about 12.1 million for recreation. I'll just note that's double our total, more than double our total taxation for all of our waste management services. And 12.1 million is, and that plus the small rec is more than 30% of our entire tax bill across the province. This is not to say we shouldn't do this. There's health benefits, but we need to start telling taxpayers today or in September, October, November, every month, what this costs, why we're doing it. I guess as Chair McFadden said, what have we heard and who have we heard it from? And if we haven't heard from you, tell us something different. If you want us to close something, not do something, tell us. Because if you're to not dig that hole in reserves and start going the other direction, we would have to increase taxation by about 10% a year right away. If you're to go beyond 1.5%, say to 2%, which is probably more responsible, knowing how dependent we are on mechanical systems, which have a way, way shorter lifespan than building envelopes, and today have a much higher cost per unit than they had a decade ago, you'd be putting away 2% a year, so taxation would go up by 12%, 12.4% right away, every year from here on, without building anything extra, just to keep it going, what's here now. And if we're going to reduce the user fees, which we're going to talk about next meeting, taxation will go up more. So, big picture, this is work that has to be done. Let's not wait till some large 300-person gathering in the Creston Rec Complex next spring before people become aware of this. These are our biggest costs across the board. Keeping people, giving them ability to be healthy, keeping them active, keeping them away from their couches, prolonging their longevity, but it has a huge expense. So I'd love us to start talking about what we heard in September with respect to outdoor, which is the cheapest way to help people stay healthy, and tell them what all of this is costing, including the indoor facilities. So thanks very much. Look forward to the details.
Thanks, Director Jackman.
Through the chair, I heard Director Jackman say combined, and I think that what we're suggesting is 85 million is per multiplex. And
that makes more sense. Thank you, sir.
No, you're welcome. And I think that, you know, the one thing about this is we are hoping, and this is the intention, is that the AMP comes back with recommendations that will inform potentially a board policy, if not inform the commissions to make decisions about facility condition indexing their budgets. And you know, the analogy is doing the $8,000 study on the Castlegar roof and finding you need $4.4 million in additional funding to repair that roof, or you don't have a facility. And I think that the AMP is going to do a little bit of that, where we spend $100,000 to say that we need to spend 10 and 15 and 20 million. But that is absolutely our goal, is to really get a better full picture of the assets that we own and what it costs to operate them, and then be able to inform decisions on how they're going to be used in the future.
Brief supplemental, Chair.
I think Joe had something to add really quickly, and then I'll jump back over to you.
Yeah, just through the chair to all the commissions, as Craig knows, yesterday we spent 20 minutes trying to figure out insurance questions that we've been asked for the value of our properties to adequately insure them. The property insurance company had, for example, I think had the complexes valued at $30 million. And so yesterday I was spending almost all afternoon trying to understand, and I still don't, what it means when I change that 30 to, you know, I've got 75. We've got some pricing around Creston that we've tried to apply across the district to try to know what that might cost. And I could have underestimated our property insurance budgets by quite a bit, because we didn't know that, you know, for example, that that total loss might have only, if we lost the Castlegar complex, we would only have funded 25% of the replacement of it.
Right.
So, so we're still trying to work through those things, but these values are going to continue to flow through the system, and we're still trying to understand how that all works.
Back to you, Director Jackman, you had supplemental?
Yes, thank you. So, and what Craig said makes more sense. If you had a clean site, I always used to think you might rebuild Creston for 50 million. Of course, you can't do that when you have an active facility. It's renovation work, it's incremental replacement, it's all far more expensive. You don't have free access to the work site for the contractor. So the numbers I tried to use, Craig's, I misunderstood. The numbers in taxation jump would probably be more realistic. 25 to 30% tax increase in 2025 and every year thereafter without anything else being built is probably the range we're looking at. And so I'd like taxpayers to start chewing on that come September, long time before we get to any budget discussions. Thanks.
Thank you. Over to Director Panko.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder, I mean, I guess this will kind of maybe the asset management plan, but if this one study uncovered an additional $4 million of expenditures and potentially, as Craig mentioned, there's maybe even many more millions of dollars being uncovered. My question, I guess, is this sustainable? And these tax increases that Director Jackman so rightly refers to, what's the threshold at which point we either develop a sustainability plan or change direction? Because we here, and I wasn't in Creston for that meeting, and frankly, this doesn't affect my area because we don't have any RDCK facilities. However, well, our own, I know, our own village, we have a problem, but there's no RDCK ones. But where's the threshold here where we say, hold on, people are complaining about being taxed so much, and if we're increasing taxes by 25% just to cover just for maintenance costs? I mean, that's a philosophical question, but I think my real question is there a sustainability plan going to be built into the asset management?
Craig, do you want to take that?
Through the chair, I can start that, and I think that the AMP will help to inform opportunities. I think that Roth IAMS do work with other municipalities, and a strategy, if you use a facility condition index, absolutely that's a number. And if you don't need to apply all of that funding, it can, a lot of that can go into reserve for replacement. And I think that to Director Jackman's point, that is an inordinate amount of an increase. But sustainability, it relates to like what I said earlier about intended use and how we're using these facilities. And there are some potential decisions that will be put to the board in the future based on this, I believe.
Director Vandenberg.
Hi, and thank you through the chair. So my question directed to staff is on, because I am familiar with the Recreation Center in Creston, less familiar with the Nelson Castlegar. Apologies if it's in the report, I didn't see it. How old is the boiler in Nelson that's being replaced, and what is the lifespan currently of the roof in Castlegar? Just to start.
Yeah, through the chair, the boilers in Nelson, I wouldn't say they failed prematurely. They were, I think they're less than 15 years old with a 20 to 25 year life cycle, but put into that harsh environment with acidic air, including chlorine, did lead to their early life cycle. And so that is, and also the harsh cycling that we put them through and heating water on a regular basis, 24 hours a day. And so that does contribute to it. The other part of your question is we don't see the estimates on equipment life cycle being as long as they used to be, where a rooftop unit was 20 to 25 years. If we get 15 years out of them now, and the one story I know about a hydro dam in the region is that they bought a multi-million-dollar generator with a 1-year warranty. So manufacturers aren't building solid state equipment anymore, and so we have to also factor that in. And that the other part of that conversation does tie into the FCM GHG feasibility study, because all the bells and whistles for the most efficient models may not be affordable, especially given that none of them last any longer for the premiums that it costs as well. But the life expectancy of the roof in Castlegar, the work we're doing on the arena, will get us 30 more years before we'll probably have to do some remedial repair. But the roof on the flat roof on the $4 million, that should be a 20 to 25 year roof repair.
Supplemental, if I may. So am I hearing that current roof has met its 30-year mandate?
Through the chair, the arena roof is approximately 45 years old, and the flat roofs, they're in that range of 30 to 45 years, depending on when they were built.
And a comment, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
So based on what Director Jackman has talked about, and in agreement with the McLaren Co.'s comments, to me, this is a sustainability complex matter. And I think we need to be quite open-minded to how are we going to maintain, we're going to drive ourselves out of the recreation business. Quite frankly, it just will become unaffordable. And so if we don't have open thoughts to what could be, what could the possibilities be with the idea of sustainability in mind, the reality is it's going to become unaffordable. And that's kind of a shocker, but it's a reality, and we need to be talking about it at the table, and our staff needs to be keying in on those types of things. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, just through the chair, we are. I think the reason that you have this report, and the reason that we've been, since we reorganized into the way that we have in ComServe, is because we could see this coming. There's actually a number of initiatives that we're doing in community services right now, because we know that asset management report in the fall Q4 is going to be a difficult one to plan through. So we're definitely anticipating that. We'll get into it a little bit in my governance report, but we really have to be thinking about efficiencies in operations. We have a lot of biases when it comes to recreation, the types of recreation that we provide. We tend to have biases that we need to provide certain things versus activities that keep our community healthy and vibrant and actually are attractive to the majority of the community. These are all conversations are going to lead to really hard conversations. I think I've been saying that now around every table for the last 6 years. It is not going to be comfortable. Indoor facilities are expensive. We have seen, I can tell you right now, there's commissions around the table in the last decade that gutted their reserves to fund operations. Used reserves to decrease taxation. And that, if we're going to be providing these services, we have to do it strategically. The board has to get strong. And what I mean by that is that there have to be things that are driven through policy to ensure that we are not shortchanging the future. Because that is what this is a reflection of. It's no different than the things that are happening to municipalities in underground services, where underground was pushed off. City of Calgary, pushed off. Those things are the things that we have to grapple with in the public sector that are driving these issues right now, where we look at shiny new and forget about what we have. And we've got to get our heads wrapped around it. Of course, I can tell you, like, there's every single person in community services has a bias. And that is, we would love to offer recreational services for free to every single resident that there is. That's our background. That's what we come from, is serving people. But we also come from the background. I think I've got a very pragmatic group of leaders around the table that also understand budgets, and we're seeing where it's going. And so just know that we're not blind to it. And that's the reason why I think we've done asset management updates every single report. And the reason why Craig is in the role that he is with asset management in that title, and looking at it across facilities so that there is a little bit of a separation of a prudent recommendation that isn't tied directly to an operation or a vulnerability. So we're trying to be open and honest about these things. So that's just what I want you to hear, is that we are doing this not because we want to increase the funding to community services, but we want you to be aware of the seriousness of where we're at. And I think, for example, the Nelson Commission, it will be going in, once Castlegar finishes, it's going to be going into a consultation process, and the commission and the steering group has said part of that process is educating the public on the condition of their current state of their buildings, so that they are aware of when they're asking for things, you're in this much of a hole right now.
Thank you. Over to Director Davidoff.
Yeah, thank you. And I really appreciate Director Jackman's kind of a State of the Union report, or State of the Assets report. Shiny new and not looking after business. We are so guilty of that at the Castlegar District Rec Commission. We're going to do new, we're going to do new. But what happened is that the projections that we did for every project did not include the asset management cost and the money that we'd have to set aside to replace the shiny new. And I have a question to staff, is that if we're looking at an average cost, let's say take the middle number there of $85 million to replace a complex, that does not include the 25-30% the increase in taxation, but does that include the asset management plan that has to go along with that $85 million project to replace that project in the future? So it's not an $85 million project. It's $85 million to build it, but then you need to set aside a plan, an asset management plan, for not $85 million, but probably double that to replace it. Is that correct? And I'm asking Stuart that question, if he's on the line.
I don't think Stuart's on the line, but I can see Craig has an answer for you.
Through the chair, I was nodding, but I think without having the numbers in front of me, the replacement cost for a facility that's built today, those numbers need to have inflation put to them, escalation costs. So if we think that 1.5% of 85 million, if you increase the replacement cost year over year, as Joe pointed out with our insurance company, where they applied 4.5% this year, that compounds the amount of funding that's required as well.
Yeah, so Chair, if I can ask a supplemental and a comment. Chair?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, thanks. So bottom line is that when we look at the asset valuation, just replacing today, say it's 85 million, and then exactly what Craig said, you have to add to our constituents, to our ratepayers. They have to understand that there's an asset management plan that has costs that has to be built into that for the future. And that's what we didn't do in the shiny new projects that we presented in the Castlegar District Rec Commission. And we undervalued. The estimate costs were so low. They were like lower class C estimates, and we're not sure, we need engineering to do. So the bottom line is that we undervalued in such a big way. We were not honest with our constituents and ratepayers when we're pushing some of these projects. And some of us were trying to raise that, and just basically it went into a black hole. The bottom line is, finally, staff is presenting to us the actual cost of doing something. And we're going to, and the other thing that's really going to be unpopular, I mean, you take a look at statistics for hockey in Canada that have been dropping and dropping and dropping. And then when you start looking at building a new arena, I mean, Joe can speak to this. He spoke to it before. I just read a report on what's happened statistically with hockey. But the key thing is that I have another question on the insurance piece. And again, it's too bad Stuart's not on the line. But who's our insurer? Like, are these assets insured through MIABC?
Through the chair, MIABC is our property insurer now, yes.
And so our own insurance company that we all own as a mutual company is telling us that the maximum insurance that we can get would give us like a percentage.
Oh, through the chair, sorry. The valuation of the buildings is not MIA's issue. The valuation of the buildings is our issue. So that's why we were updating those valuations. So one of the things that will happen, sorry for cutting you off. I just want to make sure that we got things right. This year, the Municipal Insurance Association is doing a broad-based work on valuation of buildings. The three big community centers in the regional district are part of that valuation process. We won't have that information for this insurance year, but we will for 2025, and the board will get that sometime in. I actually shouldn't say because I don't know the timeline, but sometime. I know that they've just finished. The MIA has just finished their procurement process for a company to do that across the province, because this isn't just a regional district issue. Number two is know that right now of our services, I really like to keep things like so that we're talking about facts. It is absolutely true that the regional district has not, and unless it's a water system or things that are legislated by the province, does not have an asset management plan. That includes for the building that we're sitting in right now. But what is true, I just want to say, is that the Castlegar Commission, since the previous commission, so going back to the previous incarnation, is the first commission and the first services that have got a plan in place for funding. Is the funding right now that adequate? Probably not. But it's something. So like, for example, when Director Jack says, it is true, we are drawing down reserves. But this year we taxed $700,000, and last year was 6. It was to escalate to $1 million, to hit $1 million where we thought, but prices have escalated this much. That's all coming into question. So every commission is going to have that around their table, those discussions, just to be aware. And I think, and the big piece is for the regional district, is that you have to find somehow a way of talking across services to hopefully find there's efficiencies across services that we have to find. And the siloed decision-making is going to become more and more problematic. And that's where I really think as a board, we should wait until you get those asset management numbers. You're getting an inkling, they're not going to be fun. The solutions, though, are across services. It's looking broadly. It's breaking down those silos to try and have those conversations. And to every director around that's pointed it out, it's about being transparent with the public so that they understand the difficult choices that you're going to have to make as decision makers, and that they're going to have to provide input into. Those are all true. We don't have all that information here today. That's information, we had hoped that we would have that asset management plan or report last year. It's coming this year, but all of those things are gonna feed into your decision making.
Back over to you, Director Davidoff. I know we cut you off to answer.
That's okay. Yeah, that was really important information for Joe to share. And I don't mind at all. I just got a comment to make. I think what Kelly mentioned, pricing ourselves out of recreation, particularly for indoor stuff. I think it would take all 60,000 of us working together to afford one complex moving forward, with everybody, all 60,000 residents paying for that one complex. I don't think we can afford 3. And we are coming to the point where Director Jackman very eloquently laid out what the tax burden could be. And we haven't seen the final asset management report. This is what's been bugging me for a long time, is we can't afford to sustain 3 complexes. We're already outside of affordability. If we implement realistic asset management plans for each of those complexes, when you take a look at that bill, you want to talk about 300 people, you're going to have 3,000 people showing up saying, "What are you guys doing to us?" So I'm going to stop there, but this is what I'm really happy that we're having this conversation. The day of every single community of a few thousand people having $100 million asset and an asset management plan to sustain that asset, which is not 100 million, but probably 300 million, those days are gone. So I'm going to stop there.
Thanks, Director Davidoff. Over to Councillor Tate.
Hi, thanks.
Oh, we can't hear you.
You're very soft, Kate.
Hi. How about now?
No, you're still very quiet.
Still very quiet. That's weird. How about now?
Perfect.
We can hear you.
Oh, I'll just talk louder.
Okay.
It's pretty rare for me to not be loud enough. I have a curiosity. I like what Director Davidoff is saying about the region. I know it can be really challenging because it's geographically such a large region, and it can be hard for someone who's 3 hours from a rec complex to be like, "No problem, here's $500." But I have a curiosity about the separate services, 222, 226, 227, which is like these giant complexes, and the idea of I'm afraid to say it out loud. Corporate sponsorship, is it something that we've broached? Is there a way to broach that? Is that something that we would consider, especially if we're looking at regionally, if we collapse that into one service and had some corporate sponsorships? I'm just curious. I'm just going to throw out an idea, spaghetti at the wall.
Craig or Joe, does one of you want to?
Through the chair, I mean, I don't know that corporate sponsorships are going to solve any of the issues. Could they bring in some extra revenue? Yes. But definitely it is something that if we were to look at some things more broadly would definitely be more attractive. We're not, this isn't Rogers Place or we don't have those kinds of things. But definitely looking more broadly across some items could definitely enhance the possible funding from corporations.
Can we take the other stuff, Michael?
I just don't think it's impossible when we look at our neighbors and Trail. I just don't think it's impossible when we're looking at what kind of corporations we have nearby that care about the community, that want to have employees who want to live nearby so that they can have employees. I mean, it's this conundrum of having services so that you have people, so that you have employment, so that you have community, and so on and so forth. We might just have to, I like the broadening of the scope. I like that once we have our directors saying, holy cow, we need to work together. Despite being geographically separated, we need to work together as a community, as a very large region. What does that look like? And how their revenues? It's not going to be easy, but we're having the conversations now and apparently 6 years ago. So let's start thinking collectively.
Thanks. Director Watson.
Yeah, thanks. A couple of things. The first one I want to note is just that there's a large part of this picture that isn't well described, which is not staff's issue to do. But it's really important for fellow committee members to be aware that most of the rural recreation services are contribution services. We do financial grants to them. And so the 7 halls and 5 parks that Area D and Caslo share, the parks are operated by the RDCK, but the halls are not. And while they're a lot less expensive from a taxation perspective, I do a lot of work, either through Community Works or Community Development, to support their own asset management, and they're big pieces. So not to add to the cost, but just, it's really important for my larger service area directors to understand that a lot of this work is occurring in rural areas, but not under the umbrella of the RDCK. But the directors for the area are very much involved in using other grants. So there's a much bigger price tag on all of this. What I want to premise that on is that I also represent 24 unincorporated communities that only one of them has zoning. None of them, except for one, have a water system. None of them have wastewater treatment plants. And so the playing field in terms of, a big, beautiful rec center that has all the baseline servicing in place exists in 3 major centers out of our 20 jurisdictions across the regional districts. So when it comes to taxation and the expenses, I'm over here still working on baseline things like zoning and water systems. Recreation, I'm so grateful to the nonprofit societies that continue to operate the halls. There's a lot of issues with them. Volunteer run definitely runs capacity concerns. And at the same time, they're only there because of those volunteers, and our ability to provide contribution services has been significant. What I want to also add is that what I find really fascinating is the first time I ever came across an asset management approach to assets was the FCI, the Facility Condition Index reports from Interior Health through our hospital board. And what I want to note is that if you look at any of our healthcare facilities, none of them are even close to keeping up with the FCI estimates from now, I'd say 7 years ago. In fact, I've heard our own Victorian Health Center here in Caslo is so old and outdated that we have a hard time recruiting staff to stay there. So again, a comparison into the grander picture of things. I'm not in any way saying let's let our assets become decrepit and don't support them. But I really do think there's a fine line when we silo conversations where it's like, let's talk rec, And then we're not always super cognizant of all the other aspects across this region that need to be considered. And in comparison, our rec sites are in a much better condition, especially the three major ones, than our healthcare centers. So I don't not think we need to go full bore on asset management. I think we need to go maybe a quarter to maybe a half. Absolutely, you need your reserves, but you have all the other considerations. Fire halls alone are significantly underfunded, and that's regulated. So rec is important. There's a lot of other things that come before that from my perspective. And there's a lot of other rec that is not through the RDCK, but the RDCK is supporting. And I have to step away. I have an emergency call from my mother. Sorry.
Thank you. Director Page.
Lots of good comments, and I look forward to seeing what our scores come out to in the end. I think one of the critical pieces for me when we look at what we're doing with the facility condition indexes is identifying, and Craig, I think will appreciate those opportunities or those moments where you're making investments to forego future costing, right? You want to ensure that you're keeping enough reserves, enough planning in place that something doesn't happen that you're caught flat-footed on, because that's where the cost balloons out of control. When you're mobilizing last minute, when you're fixing something because a leak is ingressed into somewhere else and rotted away or a structure. Like, as long as we have enough planning and organization and resourcing going on that we are making sure the envelopes are sealed, that the vapor barriers are appropriate, and that we're replacing mechanical systems before they fail, then I think we're setting ourselves up for mostly a good place, even though it's going to be expensive and we've underinvested for a generation at least.
Great discussion. I don't see anyone else. Great discussion. Thank you, Craig, for your report and for keeping us in the loop. Look forward to seeing the whole thing.
Sure,
We are sitting at...
Sure, can I just respond to Director Watson just quickly? I think that the comment about the fire halls, that all of our assets are included in that asset management planning. And so it isn't, we're at the all rec committee, but I think Joe was speaking to the board when he was talking about how these recommendations will come to the board to consider all of the assets in the regional district, not just recreation assets.
Thanks, Craig. And after you, David. Director David.
Yeah, I'm really watching the North Vancouver situation right now where, my God, like something that started off as, Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, like 500 million is now like $4 billion. Like, it's just surreal. And to get into something like that, is just scary. And basically that's a regional approach, but the North Van residents or ratepayers are paying, $500 a year just for that one asset, $500 of taxation a year just for that one asset. And it's probably not going to go down any. It's going to keep going up. And that's for the next 30 years. And they don't have an asset management plan in place to replace that asset, which is another, $1,000 a year or more. So I'm just really glad that this is the wake-up call. And I love it because this is what I was always afraid of, that we are at the point where we can't afford to do all the things we're doing. And we need to let our ratepayers know that and not keep promising we're going to have something new, another shiny new thing, in addition to this stuff. So I'm going to stop.
Thanks, Director. Director Watson, I see you back.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to clarify through to Craig. I'm definitely grateful we have asset management plans. I wasn't saying fire halls were not included. What I was saying is that asset management plans for water, fire, and recreation are over the top of affordability. And so we need a fine line. When we make decisions on what we're doing in reserves, we have to be really clear that it's not just one asset, it's all of these assets. The regulations on fire services through the NFPA and whatnot make a lot of decisions not at our discretion. And so it's just a cumulative impact of all of those asset management plans, which are really important. And I'll just add the last note that the province does not require these on their own infrastructure. And it's extremely frustrating because we are being extremely accountable and responsible to assets. Well, we have healthcare facilities falling apart. We have roads falling apart. So there's a double standard there and we're going in the right direction. We cannot afford to do it all. And we will have to be quite strict on what we're doing if we're not going to price people out of living here, which they already feel like we are.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else. So we are at 10:46. I'll give everyone a 10-minute break. So 10:56, we're going to get started again, okay?
Well, I said we wanted engagement.
Joe, are you?
If you're online, can you even just turn your camera on for a minute so that she can make sure that she knows who's here? That would be great. Okay, we're jumping right back into 7.3 Community Services Governance Committee Commission. Over to Joe for information. Then we have a recommendation. Yeah, over to you, Joe.
Yes, so through the chair, I won't go through the report in detail. I just want to bring some highlights of the report. Number one is that there's been a question that's been asked at multiple tables about the service committee model. I really want this to be a discussion, and it's been a lot of discussion today. So there are 6 directors who operate in a service committee model. So I thought this was a good chance for them to share their experiences on that. I don't want to put words into their mouths. I just know from a staff point of view of where there's a broader conversation across services that I've seen, and I believe that leads sometimes to efficiencies. The other piece that I want to make you aware of is that in community services, starting last April, we are actually as a management team, so myself, Tricia, and Craig are fully committed to implementing what we call lean process in our the way that we're thinking about things. So if, just so you know, like there's actually a part of the British Columbia government, it's called Lean BC. There's a number of local governments, particularly in the States, that use lean methodology to base conversations around, to try to problem solve. So we're trying to change the culture in community services to a problem-solving culture and using lean methodology. I don't want to go too far down the lean methodology piece, but what you've seen in this report is that there's a process flow map. I just want you to know that's our first cut at it. So mapping process is part of lean. What it is to create a discussion document about where we can become more efficient in our process, whereas there duplication. So I know that Craig and Tricia have been looking on a lean budgeting process map, and we've been doing that through a number of different pieces. But what I just want to bring to your attention is that there's really different levels of governance meetings. And what's happened, for those, unfortunately, Director Cunningham is I think his hand's still there? Yeah, Hans is still there. So Hans will remember a time where Recreation Commission meetings, lots of these governance structures that the board had were much less formal. And they operated very much so as advisory, very much advisory committees. Sometimes the board wouldn't even, there'd be lots of times where they were called commissions, so the same process or recommendations that came back. And I experienced a lot of where the board would reject the thing, and then I would go back to commissions would get upset we start feeling unwanted, and there was a lot of conflict. But rightfully so, the regional district has said, hey, there's certain formal pieces of our governance structure that need to be formed. So commissions need to be formed. But that led to a lot of commissions, when that transition started to happen, a lot of members around commissions feeling it was getting overwhelming. Like the formality of the meetings, the formality of having to be available to broad, like having to have virtual and not virtual to ensure that we're transparent in that decision making. So my experience is that commissions may be an old model. That may be an old model that we need to have some serious conversations around. So it goes board, commission, committees, those are the formal, real formal models. And then there's advisory committees. And you see these in advisory committees in planning. You see them now at the water advisory committees. They serve a different role. And I think there is a good conversation for the board about how to layer the formality and the informal. So advisory can be less formal. And there's a real advantage to that. Maybe not around the bigger services so much, but in particular around some of the rural services that might actually work a little bit better. I don't have all of the answers. What I do know is that at the commission, there's been a number of commission tables that have brought it forward and have asked for staff to report back on different things. And there's one formal thing that came at the board last meeting, and that was around Area K and the cusp. So I think that there's an ability to do, instead of doing an inefficient place of where we're writing 4 reports, presenting the same information 4 or 5 different times, where you could give direction to staff through the board to bring that all together and to, in whatever way the board wants to hold that, to bring that piece together. And I think that can include, just like All Rec does, our counselors that are serving on some of those commissions and those kinds of pieces. But I think there's an advantage to having one presentation of that information versus trying to do it 4 or 5 times. So that's really what the report is about, is trying to consolidate that conversation so that it makes better use of staff time and also makes better use of director's time. And I think what you saw in that report is us also trying to quantify how much time do commission meetings take. There's a whole bunch of work that happens in the background, and sometimes we're not doing that work well because there are so many commission meetings. When I was writing the report, I had 4 commission meetings that week. So literally going from one table to the next table to the next table to the next table. That takes a lot of time. There's things we don't want to lose. I think I've tried to explain that in the report, but I really do think there's an advantage for the whole board, and something similar to All Rec, but it's not really an All Rec, just an All Rec conversation, to have that discussion.
Okay, so just for clarity around the discussion here, so you're wanting from us discussion around whether or not we want you to come back with the report that's here with some suggestions on what that would look like, or are we having the discussion about what that might look like? Because I think those are 2 very different discussions around this table, and I just want clarity from your perspective. Is this report just looking to get direction from us if we want you to go ahead and actually come back with, here's all your options, and then we discuss them at that time? Or are you wanting to open the conversation to say, here's all the thoughts that we have on what the options should be?
So I thought there were a couple things. One is the recommendation. So, and that is, I think that's fairly clear. So that's about having one discussion.
Coming back with an idea.
One report. And that would go to the board because you're actually talking about multiple commissions possibly. The other thing was that I wanted it to be something that you could talk about your governance experiences though right now.
Okay.
But that's up to you to determine.
Nope, great. I just thought it'd be good to have clarity around what I got. Great. Okay, I got Director Watson.
Thanks. Sorry, my mouse was a little slow there. So in terms of, experiences from directors who have had one of these committees, I just first want to note that the shared services model, recreation service is one of them. It would represent all shared services. And so I'm kind of confused on why this is at all recreation, other than I can assume that recreation seems to be the most, the biggest service that maybe these committees would consider. So I'm not sure exactly why it's here. I would say that this is actually a board item. That being said, the biggest thing we do with our shared services committee with Caslo and Area D is actually budget discussions. We get to talk about all of our services outside of the board table where we don't get that discussion time. So whether it's fire, economic development, search and rescue, recreation, any of those things, that's where we hold those conversations, and they're really great to have. It's a great committee. It also builds relationships with your neighbors. So Caslo, of course, I love Caslo. Caslo is awesome. But it also means that Mayor Hewitt and I can do a lot of other conversations in a formal setting where the public is invited, and deep dive into what those issues might be. So it's a great model. I think, as the chair of the board watching the budget process, that would be my number one reason to say these shared services committees are so essential, is you get to ensure that, if IJ and Castlegar have a shared service and they haven't all agreed on what that taxation rate is, that's what the committee time is for. So you don't end up at the table outvoting each other on things that should have been discussed outside the table. Just as one example, Creston ABC doing the work they've done in the past few years has drastically changed the ability for those regions to think as a region, on a sub-regional level where those services make sense. So I'm absolutely in favor of these committees. I think it's a great way to govern and work on those specific details that don't always have space for at the board. They are public meetings. And I would just say that, again, process-wise, this would be better suited at the board table than all rec. It's only one of the shared services. Thanks.
Through the chair, that's why the recommendation is to the board. The reason it's at all rec is that there are recommendations at Recreation Commission or Park Commission tables that ask for staff to bring back the similar reports. So I'm trying to consolidate all of those conversations and make that recommendation to the board. Exactly what you're suggesting. It should come from there.
Okay, Director Watson? Director Duffman?
Yeah, thank you. So first point, Crescent Valley Services Committee is a great model, works good, fulsome conversation. You heard me say that 500 times already in the last year and a half, so trust me, it works. Second point, Joe, appreciate very much that you talk about commissions versus advisories. Commissions have and expect to have a direct voice to the board, whereas the advisories, I think, are becoming more aware that they really are voicing their concerns to staff and the director. That's a good thing, because not everything needs to go to the board. You'll see Riondale Commission of Management recommendations sometimes that accidentally or inadvertently landed the board, and they don't make any sense going to the board. So the key to success, and where I think your recommendation to the board needs a couple words added, is that we recognize that we're going to include an advisory model. Now, we've seen with water just the beginning of a transition from commissions to advisories. They're only meeting twice a year. That won't work. We will disenfranchise people. If we disenfranchise people a little bit, you see what happens when consequences of a couple people in the public not feeling engaged, at, say, Crawford Creek Park, took up easily between myself and staff time 100 hours, easily. So public engagement has to be built in, and maybe the way to do that is to add just those few words about including some kind of advisory model. So if we were to add the words, proposed schedule for implementing sub-regional services committees, including community advisory model, a community advisory model for, and then you'd run down that list. So I won't try and move the recommendation. I'd like to hear everyone else's concerns. And I'm going to point out, you missed one of the old directions. It's probably 7, 8 years old, where there was a governance direction to either rejoin regional parks, ABC and Creston, or create an Area A commission. So this is why this exercise needs to include those advisory models, because you will probably never have fulsome input from Area A regional parks if they got to go into Creston to feel they're being heard. So I like what you've written, Joe. I think a couple words added to your recommendation would be excellent board direction. Curious what others think.
I'll come back to Director Jackman for exact wording when we get there. Moving on to Director Papa.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'm glad you clarified at the beginning whether they want input at this table here now or later on or whatever. And I'd like the option of providing input directly to Manager Shuriko on the problems that I see within my area with commissions, quorums, training of chairs. I can go on with the list. Probably occupy a lot of the time here at the board table. So, and the advisory committees is something that I would support. That would be a good thing. And anyways, I will provide my comments to Manager Shuriko at a later date.
That's good, Joe. If people have specifics around their own area and concerns, you'd want that information.
Yeah, through the chair, and to myself and Mike Morrison, Mike and Angela have been supporting, Jenna, myself, Mike and Angela have been discussing how to strategize. We'll bring the best information forward too.
So if you have specific comments, send them to Mike, Joe, Jenna, and Angela.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Director McClaren.
Thank you, Chair. I won't repeat what's been said, but I agree with very much yes to the recommendation, because I think we do need to review the way we deliver these services. I'm encouraged to hear the lean process model, because we have had, as Joe knows, we've had significant challenges, like Director Popoff said, about just very, very basic things, like just even holding a meeting. And very briefly, just specifically on Recommission 4 for Director Weatherhead and myself, our whole budget depends on the year, but it's around $40,000. And if you look at our current financial plan, anywhere between 33 and 42% of that actually goes to grants, and the rest is overhead. So when we're talking about lean process, if we're just approving grants, Teresa and I just need to talk. We don't need to spend 60%, 65% of it on paying staff to run meetings that we don't actually even hold. So that's just some feedback. So very much looking forward to the outcome of that.
Great. Director Welcome.
Thank you. I have a couple of clarifying questions. Would this give opportunity for other groups that you're finding in your area, be able to have them invited to that meeting to maybe get some more clarification on what they're using funding for, how they're benefiting the community as a whole?
Through the chair, and please, any of the directors from the two present service committees, the answer is yes. For example, in Creston, contribution service, community groups or community organizations who are responsible for the expending of contribution service funds come to that committee and present their operating plans, their 5-year budget cycles, what's working, what's not working, and it's a back and forth conversation.
Thank you.
So that does happen.
Okay, thank you. That's good, because the one thing in Salmon Area G is we hear from the library all the time as a council, and Director Cunningham sits on that board, so he hears it directly. But the public doesn't hear from anybody else, so that's why I wanted that clarification on that. And honestly looking forward to the mean methodology, because I agree is that we have such an overhead. Staff knows the challenges that we've had to try and get a few people together to have a meeting. I think we've had to cancel too because not having quorum.
Director Graham.
Thank you. So through the chair, and great conversation here. I'm just curious, I guess, like, how does this work? And maybe this isn't, maybe I got to get this offline, but how does it work when you've got like a part of your area in one service that's defined service and then the other part is not? So like, does that work in this kind of thing? And then also I think Director Watson already touched on this one, is what about like all our community halls that are running their own rec programs? I'm not sure how that fits into this type of thing.
Staff, do you want to answer?
Through the chair, I thought maybe the directors who are involved, because I think Amy or Susan can talk about how their grants are given to those halls, how that works right now.
Director, who did you say, Director Hewitt or Director Watson?
Yeah.
Director Hewitt or Director Watson, do you guys have an answer for how you do that? Director Watson, that's how you unmute.
Yeah, so both defined services, like Casla and I share the library service, which is defined, not all of Area D is included. We talk about the budget, and the defined aspect doesn't change the fact that we still have to set a budget, and we still have to discuss it. So defined doesn't make a difference. Although I have one partner, I think if you're, Nelson E, F, and G, depending on which service is involved, you could then have people that might not be involved in the discussion in a shared service. Because let's say you have a rec service that G is not involved in, but they're involved in other aspects. So it would just be, what service are you involved in if it's split up between several. And then when it comes to recreation, again, our recreation service is 7 halls and 5 parks. The 5 parks are run by, 3 of them are run by the regional district. 2 of them are run by the village of Caslo, and the rest of the halls are contribution services. And so again, we set the budget on those, but the budgets for the contribution services are annual requests from our halls and the societies that run them. And they can apply for operational and capital funding. And then Director Hewitt and I meet at the shared services meeting to determine what are we approving. And we generally have 3 or 4 meetings leading up to the final budget so that we can see how it all adds up. And we'll receive delegations from each service leader. So like for search and rescue, they'll come in and be a delegation at, let's say, our December meeting. We know what they're looking for. Library, same thing. They're a delegation. They're an external entity. Again, a contribution service. They'll come and make their request. We'll discuss it, and then we'll make recommendations that go into the budget. You'll rarely see those recommendations go to the board because their budget, they go directly into the budget, and Stuart and or our recording secretary will just direct them into the budget component. If there's actually changes to the service, then the shared services committee can make a recommendation to the board that would then instigate a change to a service or something like that. So hopefully that answers it. Defined services don't make a big difference. You still talk about them, but you'd probably remove one of your partners in the discussion if they're not actually in that service. So hopefully that helps. Love to hear Director Hewitt's perspective too.
Director Hewitt, do you have anything to add?
I think that Director Watson outlined it perfectly, but I do concur that it works very well for us. It reduces the number of meetings that we do have to have. And we do have to have future discussions about the future of a couple of the services or the commissions that don't have enough bodies to populate them. So they aren't currently operating, but those are the kind of discussions that we can have at our shared services meetings. And then it doesn't have to involve the whole of the board and doesn't take up an inordinate amount of staff time with multiple meetings. It's generally, like Director Watson had indicated, about 4 meetings a year. So greatly reduces the burden on staff.
That answer, Director Graham? You good? Great. Director Davidoff.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question to Commissioner DeBoon is the chair of the Crescent Services Committee. So maybe just a couple of questions to you, Chair DeBoon. First of all, do the electoral areas in Creston, like A, B, and C, do you still have APHCs? Okay, yes, you do. That's answered. And then the second question, and I think I asked Commissioner DeBoon this question before, Director DeBoon or Mayor DeBoon, whichever you prefer, worship. But to Arnold, through the chair, bottom line is that I think you answered this before. In terms of the governance model on how the Services Committee works, I just want to confirm that you said it was one director, one vote. So basically, Creston had a vote, A had a vote, B had a vote, C had a vote. That's how you decide everything, correct?
Basically, yeah. There are issues that are more pertinent to one part of the area than others, but when we have these discussions, it comes down to one vote for each of us. Yeah.
Thank you. So then, Chair, I would like to add to what Director Jackman has posted is that we need to add the governance piece to any report. So, and Director Jackman, if you can slot in the governance piece and how that works, because it's not in the recommendation right now. It says operational, but there's no governance word in there, and that needs to be in there.
So through the chair, the intent is that it is a governance, like when it says operational, it means operational of the governance committee, because this is about governance. It's not about establishment bylaws of services. And through to the chair, just there's a part of the report where it says all answers for how a services committee governance model may be set up can be different. So in Creston, it works one way. That doesn't necessarily mean it needs to work that way across all of them. Just to be clear.
Okay, thank you.
Great, you good? Yeah, good. Director Watson.
Thank you. Just so everyone knows, committees and commissions never have corporate votes. So it's always one vote per, unless you're at the board table. It's the only time they're applied. The second note is I do want to caution the notion, and perhaps I'm misunderstanding it, but a shared services committee governance model is not the same thing, nor should it be connected to dismantling or discontinuing a recreation commission or any other commission that's related to public input into our governing structures. They're two very different things. And I would think that combining those two, like, I just don't think it's wise, because you can have a water services commission. We have a whole bylaw on advisory committees related to water services. Shared services cover all shared services. Rec commissions, dismantling them, moving them from advisory committees, I really recommend that needs to be a separate motion and a separate conversation, because they're not the same thing. Just because you establish a shared services committee should not equate anything to do with what's happening with your public input committees and commissions. It doesn't mean you can't change those as well. They're just different governing bodies, and connecting them, for me, again, I look to Director Jackman and correct me where I'm wrong, but I feel like that is overcomplicating something that needs to be separate.
Director Jackman, do you have a response?
Sure, thank you, because I was just opening up chat to try and type in my name with a question mark. I think part of why Joe gave us that chart of how many hours are spent on the little commissions is because he's looking for efficiency across the board. So if we don't say it here, that there's going to be some change in these other little groups, then we're going to be facing it within the year. So I'd like it to all be looked at right now. Struggling with Riendell Commission of Management, they're trying to make changes to a building by painting and shuffling, where the building needs a rework, like millions of dollars. And so long as they're a commission of the board and reporting to the board and having their own strong opinions, it's a struggle I can see for Joe and his staff to try to work through the big picture items, which we were talking about earlier today, when community just wants to dwell on, well, it'd look a lot better if we just painted. And I'm literally meaning just paint the hallways. So there has to be an understanding that that commission with a voice to the board is maybe out of date. They can no longer keep up with that facility and its needs, but they're super valuable as an advisory. The other thing is I don't want to see the little small rec commissions necessarily disappear, but if there is an easier way to run them that's more efficient for Joe as an advisory instead of a commission of the board, I want to hear Joe's opinion on that. So I'm not saying they disappear, but I'm looking for Joe's opinion, not Joe's, all of that staff group's opinion on what all could we include in a transition that would be a better outcome for staff and community.
Sure, Gary, you just want Joe to tell you what he wants, and then you're just gonna give it to him. That's from you today is that you are, I'm just kidding. Okay, so I'm seeing from Director Watson, and I know Director Jackman had thoughts on the motion too, that there's some question around what the motions should be. I'll put my own thoughts in. I would like to see how we can have more efficiencies and have better communication all around. And so I want to see all the options, whether or not that's dismantling and joining them together or creating more or whatever that is. I'd rather see all of our options and then weigh all of that out at that time before making a decision on what I think will work and won't work at this point. So I'll jump over to you, Director Watson, if you have thoughts on how you want that separated out to make sure we capture both, since you put that into chat.
Thank you. Well, I don't discount either direction. I think they're both important, but they're both serving different purposes. So when you tie them together, there's advisory committees for other shared services that are not in the recreation portfolio. So directing the board to to provide a report on shared services between subregions, that should be one motion. The other motion should be the advisory committee option or any other options to deal with management commissions and committees that are based on public input and public involvement. So they're two different governing bodies, and combining them in one motion is just my concern that you're overcomplicating two different governing directions. And so just make them two motions is all I'm suggesting. Divide them. They're not on the table. So I just suggest to Director Jackman, if I'm on the same track, if I'm not missing something major here, that you make them two separate motions. Because when it looks to those advisory committees, rec staff is going to have to also be conferring with any other services that have advisory committee commission structures, not just recreation ones, where shared services is all types of all your shared services. And that's directors only. That is not the public. So that's my recommendation.
So you're looking at keeping the recommendation that's on the table in its format and then adding a second recommendation with what Director Jackman was requesting for. Got it. Okay. Director Jackman, are you comfortable with that?
Definitely, because I think Chair Watson's correct that Joe's focus will need to be just on some future potential advisories, and other departments might need to go other directions. So I'm good.
So Chair, can I ask a question?
I'll put you back on the list. I just have Director Page here, and then I'll go for you.
Okay, thank you.
Go for Director Page.
Yeah, it's good to hear about all the experience from fellow directors and the shared services and how that works. This has come off of parks in our area as well as recreation in our area, which was one of the ones listed. But where the bylaw and the structure of the services, I'm specifically thinking of an unhoused part of the work that the regional district does, which is economic development in EF and Nelson through a memorandum of understanding, but there's no commission or committee. In fact, we even repealed an outdated bylaw that governed that because it wasn't meeting, wasn't quorum, it wasn't part of practice. Is that an ADP MOU serves as an advisory committee that is filled with both electeds and non-electeds across the subregion. And so it doesn't preclude, if there's, in my mind, based on the work we're sitting for, it doesn't preclude that advisory committee continues, that the advice and the minutes and the suggestions on budgeting from that advisory committee would not flow up into a shared services committee, be discussed in the scope of the project. We have a service, a defined service for economic development. I think it's S201 or something. And it just has nowhere we ever discuss it except until it gets to the board. But now, if we were able to get on the other side of the shared services model, there would be somewhere to have that discussion, along with the discussion with the rec budget, along with the discussion of the parks budget, and we could see it all together and have a discussion about the library. So I don't think it precludes there still being advisories if they're laid out in the bylaw or laid out by previous actions, previous commissions, or even the new commission that we form them, that we take their advice, that those get rolled into the reporting, then we continue to have that process.
Joe's nodding a lot, so the chair.
Great. Director David, you got one last thought before we go to recommendations?
Excuse me, Chair, I've had my name in the chat for ages and other people have been speaking multiple times without getting a turn.
I'm sorry, Director Main, it's actually not in my chat. I'm not sure why. If it's not going to everyone or if it's just, but I'm so sorry, I missed you. It's not in my chat. Director Main, go right ahead. I'll jump to Director David off for a second time after.
I may have entered it incorrectly and not directed it to everyone. I'll go back and check later. But a couple of things. Oh my God, you mean we have to change what we're doing? So that, there's, and I'm speaking not just for myself, but for the residents who are on the committees and commissions. I think there's going to have to be a lot of discussion with our other bodies to gain buy-in for this. Director Popoff mentioned that he had some thoughts that he would share directly with Joe. I would ask Director Popoff share them with me and with New Denver Director as well, because we likely could be the three of us in a shared services committee, possibly even SLOCAN. So it's going to, and I also, we would need to clarify exactly what committees and commissions, what services would be included. And really to come up with a way of managing the input from our residents so that they don't feel pushed off even farther than they already are from the decision making around the services that they get. So I just wanted to add that as our little potential sub-region has those concerns and has the other concerns that other directors have already stated. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Main. Sorry, I missed it. Not sure where it went to. into space, I'm sure. Director David, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just still a little confused about Director Jackman's motion and then suggesting two motions. Excuse me. I thought the intent was to have for example, IJ in the city of Castlegar, to have a sub-regional services committee to be able to discuss a whole broad range of things, because if we separate them, then we only have one shared service, which is rec. So why create a shared services committee when we only have one shared service, if we're not going to talk about other things?
I think, and I'll go over to over to Joe to tell me if I'm...
No, sorry.
No, go for it.
Yeah, so through the chair. So for example, in Castlegar, you actually have three technically contribution services, like not that the city of Castlegar is a contribution service, but it funds the library. Area I funds the library. Area J funds the library. So it is also, I think, a place where community groups come to engage into those conversations, it is more broad than a recreation commission, where sometimes you may say, why would we have a library at a rec commission meeting? So it does give you more flexibility.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's what I was just basically what I was gonna say is I think we have a lot of services that may not be formal services through RD3K, but that we're all funding in some capacity. And so they are shared, even if they're not shared at the RDCK table. So to figure out what that might look like. Director Watson?
No, sorry, I just thought you might want me to explain again what I was thinking, but it's fine. I think you got it. Okay. You do have more than one share. You also have economic development. That was the one I was thinking.
Our economic development is actually through the RDCK isn't a shared service, but we do all contribute to it in different ways. Great. Okay, so I'm going to go over to Director Jackman. I believe you had a motion. Do you want to pick the motion? And are you keeping it the same now?
Sure, thanks, Chair. Little crude wording, but as a separate motion, and I understand why it might be separate and only pertaining to recreation, I did just put some words in chat. But I think the first thing is that I will move the staff recommendation as presented in the agenda as the starting point. I'll move that recommendation.
Director Page seconded. Any further discussion on that first motion that's on our agenda? I'm not seeing any. Oh,
Walter did have his hand up.
did you bring that up, Walter? Did I miss it?
Oh, just,
Yeah, Dr. Petoff.
yeah, if I may, Chair, is when we talk about shared services, Area 8 shared some of the services with the 3 villages, some with only 1 village, and also library service with Area F. So, it's going to be a dilemma for me to establish a shared services committee. And I agree with the advisory committees or whatever, they can be combined, one on the northern portion of H, one on the southern portion of H, and the advisory committee could be myself and Director Newell on the library. So, there are a lot of nuances to do that. It's not that simple.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the idea, is we'll get something back that will give us some guidance on maybe the how with all the nuances, for sure. Any other discussion on that before I call the question? Okay, all those in favor? And anyone opposed? I'm not seeing any. Okay, I'll move over to you, Director Jackman. You want to read out your second motion, and Teresa, did you get it in chat there? Okay, great, excellent.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, because I think if you go to page 39 of 45 in the agenda package, you can see Joe's pretty complicated chart. So I want to make sure there's board direction that he continues to look for efficiencies and maybe trim literally hundreds of hours off of staff time trying to do his side of this whole governance thing. So suggest that second motion could be that staff recommend to the board opportunities to convert commissions and committees related to recreation to community advisories in order to increase efficiency and service governance while maintaining the ability for public to engage with the RDCK.
There a seconder for that? Second, Director Rockwood. Any discussion on that one? Not seeing anyone in, and I'm not seeing anyone in chat. Okay, all those in favor? And any opposition online? Not seeing any. Okay, great discussion. We are moving on to 7.4 allocation policy and process update. Over to you, Tricia.
Awesome. Thank you. Through the chair, I will share my screen. I think I can do that, Teresa. You should. Perfect. Okay, so you should all now see the allocation policy and process update presentation. This, I do not believe, is officially in your agenda package, but it's aiming to summarize the report that is in your agenda package. And just for clarity, I will also be calling on Tia Whaling, who I'm assuming I can't see in my screen anymore, but I'm assuming Tia's probably turned on her video, as well as Joe and Craig to provide any additional input to the presentation as we go, and certainly to answer any questions. So in your package, you do have the full report. So like I said, this does aim to sort of summarize some key pieces of it for ease of reading. If I can hit the right button. Let's try this. Nope. Let's try. Hold on.
I have to just scroll. Looking at what?
Oh, there we go. Okay. Buttons are working. Perfect. Okay, so the purpose of the report today is largely to share some challenges associated with the space allocation process within RDCK recreation facilities, and specifically where this comes to a head most often is within pools. So if you can envision a shared space like a pool where you would have lane usage, public swim, potentially a swim club, maybe some lessons, private lessons, and any other number of interest groups wanting to be in the facility all at once, space allocation becomes a major source of challenge for us, especially at those very high competing interest times, which are typically evenings and weekends. So we want to provide a very high level overview of the existing allocation policy. I know that was reviewed
with the All Rec Committee not too long ago, but I also know it may not be top of mind for everybody as it is with staff in our world. And kind of like a theme of the day is certainly to engage you in dialogue around these issues so that we can help use your input on creating a path forward to create further efficiencies. So there's a definite theme of today, efficiencies around continuing to improve our processes and better support how we work with user groups, how we provide services, as well as to ensure that we're continually improving our processes and not just assuming that what we adopted even as recently as April of 2022 continues to serve us well today. And then certainly we do have a suggested path forward in the recommendation, and it's to solicit your support on those action items that we've identified, and there may be others through our conversation. So how these issues have come to be, one of them is we review feedback from user groups on a regular basis. So through the allocation procedure, we have at least 2 opportunities a year where we are regularly engaging with our user groups, going through processes of allocation discussions, and every time there are challenges and issues that come up. And so part of the lean philosophy thinking, just to kind of keep some of this alive and well in this conversation today, is very simply those things that bother you, you should look at and consider why and see if there's ways to improve them. So of course, when we have 2 opportunities at least a year where we go, boy, these are some issues that consistently come up, that maybe there's reason to look at them differently. And then certainly to review, when we review our administrative practices with our staff teams, so the second bullet point was really how we hear from other people, but when we review it with our staff team and certainly understand the challenges and conflicts that they end up in, this obviously creates a lot of time, and I would say possibly wasted opportunity for them to be doing something else if we could improve the processes for them over time. So in short, the there is a policy that exists for recreation allocation. It was initiated back in 2018 and adopted by the board in April of 2022. It is directly tied to the fees and charges policy, which is also very much the benefits-based approach is embedded into both of these processes, so fees and charges and allocation. The primary objectives of the allocation policy were to create consistent schedules, use transparent tools and practices for decision-making, and to establish fair and equitable use by users. So that's generally our rental or third-party groups. To provide the highest allocation priority to those activities providing the highest public benefit, and the lowest allocation priority is provided to those activities where the benefits are primarily derived by individuals. So we've just put the image of the benefits continuum, which I know you've probably seen in multiple reports over time, but we keep it live and well. Maybe we'll change the colors next time to make it look a little different. So again, in short, the allocation policy has 2 different seasons or intakes, for lack of a better word to describe it. One is a regular season, one is the summer season. Groups over a set timeline within our procedure document would identify when they have to submit core registration information. There's deadlines that they have to submit their requests for usage of facilities. It identifies when allocation meetings. You were just making me question whether it was the same on both screens, Diana. Okay, good, perfect. I can't see those screens. As well as how and when we confirm schedules so that groups know what space they have and when they can start and when they can kind of move about their business within their groups. So the 8 items identified there is actually the allocation priority. So our highest priority would go to programs and services for facilities for families and youth. Second would go to special events, community events, or representative groups. Youth nonprofit community regular use would be third. Representative community group regular usage is fourth. RDCK programs and services for adults is fifth. Adult nonprofit community group regular usage is sixth. And then we have private renters followed by commercial renters. At the end of the day, all of this really comes to bear where this priority allocation becomes really important is when we have competing interest for the same time. And so it helps us through a matrix for decision-making resolve conflicts with groups. And often some of these conflicts can be resolved through allocation meetings with users where they say, oh, I didn't realize this group needed this. I'm happy to give up half an hour over here and you can have an extra half an hour over there. That certainly is not always as happy-go-lucky if I've just made it sound, but the concept is that through sort of shared understanding of each other, that they can hopefully come to some resolve and understand the challenges that we have in this process. So there is a procedural document that outlines and supports the implementation of this policy. However, as noted at the very beginning, the reason we brought this forward is that there's parts of that now with roughly 2-ish years of time using that policy, we have some suggestions and maybe, or things that have surfaced that we'd like to sort of relook at. So in the report, we identify some of the challenges, and so this is aiming to provide a very high-level summary of what those challenges actually are. So one of the issues is that we think it's time to review the actual allocation procedures and decide what might need to change based on the feedback that we've heard. So right now we have issues with the timing on when groups submit requests to us and how that aligns with our program development and the challenges related to groups and their seasonality of their sport. All of those, I'll call it types of services or how we plan and organize services don't currently align. So, and it's very difficult, and maybe just to use summer as an example, where we might want to do programming that starts, and Tia can correct me if I'm wrong, say that goes for July and August, but the summer swim clubs are saying, well, actually, we need to plan our season as of this date, or we don't know our registration by this date, so and then we have to suddenly change our processes or our programming. Meanwhile, we have all kinds of advertisements and marketing out that now is erroneous in nature. So there's a whole bunch of challenges with how those timelines were originally established that now have really surfaced as some of the programming has really, grounded themselves in their ways of organizing programs for the region, and it's causing a fair amount of problem. So some of the actions that we think might be appropriate in this section would be to develop potentially a new communications plan for services. What that's actually saying is the leisure guide the right mechanism for promoting services? Is it right for all services? Is it right for some? Should aquatics look different? Should we use whole different tools related to marketing and promotions that are different, that might better align and allow some of these things that each party sort of needs to be a little smoother over time? Obviously, if we change some of that communication plan, we all know kind of like the school year, people get a little regimented on going, oh, right, the leisure guide should be coming out on this date for summer programs, and oh, why isn't pool in there? And, there's a lot of work that would need to go into that. We certainly can look at adjusting allocation procedure timelines. That has definitely been a request of both our programming teams and I also believe some of the user groups, in particular in the pools. And also to continue to look at our priority matrix to say, does it still make sense? Is that still the tool? Is there any tweaking of that in our decision making that is causing issues that we need to reconsider? So we also know, again, lots of these are ideas that are out there right now, but changes to how spaces are assigned within these shared venues. So what happens right now is in the process of people or groups requesting time, there can be moments where they say, I need 3 lanes 4 days a week for the months of July and August. And they're doing that because it's on anticipated numbers of people registering for, say, summer swim club. And then they go, oh, guess what? Maybe our swim club numbers didn't come in quite as high as we thought. We only need 2 lanes 3 days a week. Now, of course, that's happening within our cancellation policies, which are only 7 days out. Meanwhile, we've taken that space away from public use or programming time and potentially could have done something that would have created higher and better use in those spaces. That just becomes an inefficient process. So it's not, we don't know, and I'll touch on this a little bit more, we don't know how often that happens, we don't have great data on it, but we know it exists. And it's more problematic in some facilities than others. So some of the solutions on this one were to alter our cancellation procedure or potentially to look at what it might look like if we limited the amount of space to any one group that they could request. So maybe if we have a 5-lane pool, maybe the maximum amount of space that ever can be booked at any given time is X amount of space on these peak periods of time. And then groups have to sort of reorganize themselves. Not suggesting it's a good idea, just suggesting it though. Public use commitments. This is a big one, and I know it's come back to definitely the All Rec Committee and probably has popped its head in to different commission meetings, is providing meaningful public use of pools is not always possible the way we currently manage our spaces. So for example, right now in Castlegar, I believe, there are moments in time where there is one lane available for public use and potentially the hot tub and potentially the leisure pool. And the question on the table is to go, if somebody came for public swim, is that meaningful public time for someone to find value in coming to a public swim during that moment where there's, say, only one public lane? So of course, if you're 3, or potentially if you're an older person or somebody that just loves to go to the hot tub, you might go, yeah, no problem. You know, I'm happy to go to the leisure pool. I don't care about the one lane. But there's also people that go, boy, if I'm a teenager, I want to frolic in the main pool. You can imagine trying to be confined to one lane to go, is that meaningful public time? So we know that we have never actually defined what public use means and what meaningful public time might actually look like in these spaces. And then we also need to define also what is actually the minimum public space commitment that we would have that would help guide how we would then manage allocation of spaces for other competing interests. So that's on the table. We also know that there's a challenge related to having limited data for decision making. So what we are talking about in this case is my example of, say, a user group booking space or requesting an amount of space and then giving space up. We have no great way of saying, of all of the groups that make this request at the time of allocation, is it 50% of that time that's actually utilized? Is it 100% of that time that's utilized? Does that change based on summer, fall, or winter usage? We don't have any good data on that across all of our major facilities. And on the flip side, we also don't have great data that says, well, is there another public use that we could provide if that space was free? So, and the wait list management is usually the one that comes up in conversation to go, in our case, we can't accommodate everybody at all times. We have wait lists for programs. Swimming lessons are a prime example of that, where we say, but do we know how many of those could have been accommodated had that space been available? Or the fact that we even cap our registration at some point because we know we don't have more space is actually a unique administrative process to our service compared to how currently the historical practice has been managed within user groups. The way they make requests is to go, our registration is wide open, meaning you can keep applying and signing up for, say, swim club or any other type of user group, and we're just going to keep that registration open versus saying, this is the space you have, and within that space, this is the amount of people that might make sense. And of course, swim club would know that way better than I would. We know what that is for our services, but those philosophical administrative mandates don't align, which then also create some challenges. So data, finding ways to collect information or analyze it would certainly be something that we think could be helpful as we're kind of working through some of these allocation issues. So space allocation for clubs and third-party users. So again, they're making requests and that take considerable staff time to adjust or to consider, evaluate, adjust, do whichever that might be depending on the group. And often the first request is in some, it's based on reality, but it is a little bit of wishful thinking to go, we're anticipating 60 kids to sign up for, you know, this particular swim club thing, because that's how many participated last year. Well, of course, we all know anything can happen and those numbers don't always land that way. So it can be difficult to identify that wishful request versus actually more something based on reality. So some of the actions that we think of that in that case might be to consider identifying really set times and space for user groups while ensuring appropriate public access can still be maintained, and investigating required changes in process with user groups if we were to look, especially when they're looking to book in more than one facility. So we have some groups that actually look to make facility requests, and I'll use Nelson and Castlegar is probably the corridor that makes the most sense, where they go, oh, I'm going to put my request in Nelson, and oh, I'll put it in Castlegar as well. But if I don't get everything, maybe I can move things around, or we'll see what Castlegar can give me compared to Nelson. Meanwhile, you've got two staff groups doing something to try to sort this out. It's difficult for them to connect because at the end of the day, all they have is the information provided, and then everybody's having to readjust when knowing that they actually don't need space in both venues, typically. So that's a bit of a challenge. We have administrative practices related to new groups or services. So this is an interesting one, and we just didn't know how clear this was, because it was a good conversation among staff, was the decision has never been made on the number of user groups that can be effectively accommodated or should be permitted in any given host facility. So, for example, there can be upwards of about 4 or 6 different groups that are, say, actively looking to use a pool space. You know, school swim clubs, Special Olympics, multiple different competitive swim clubs, synchronized swimming, and the list goes on. So is there a reason to consider that maybe we have, if we go, can we accommodate a 7th one? Should we accommodate a 7th one? Is there a reason to limit that number of users to say we can't serve anybody well if we have too many? Should they be diversified across the district? There's a host of questions related to that topic. But it's really also, in this case, identifying what's the process for a new group to come into the picture. So let's say we'll use pickleball, brand new sport on the, I know it's not a pool program, but a brand new sport that shows up in our recreation field, and suddenly there's an onslaught of people that are making demands on spaces, but we don't actually have a good process to say, well, what's actually possible to accommodate those groups? It is adding a new swim club because somebody thinks that this, either a new sport or a new group should occur in Castlegar, Creston, or Nelson. Does it make sense? Or should we have some framework around that before they go out and get started and then start coming and asking for space? And we also think, there's an obvious action in here for us, which is to certainly reach out to other local governments and see how they manage these situations. We will definitely not be the only facility that has these challenges. I know the Lower Mainland faces this a lot. I can't remember which municipality it is, but when I worked in the Lower Mainland, there were some that only allowed for 2. And that was because the demand on facilities was so high for public usage and lessons and the diversity of services, even in their own public lessons, that they just physically couldn't accommodate more. Again, totally different environment, but I do believe there's some examples out there. And certainly, lastly, sometimes our own success can create historical challenges that we don't realize are being created until they become a problem. And certainly, how space is requested by users and their anticipated usage through anticipated usage, how our wait lists are managed, the fact that we even have them and that we're not able to provide service to everybody that we would like to, and ensuring that processes exist for making sure that the group is not providing an overlapping service to what we're providing are things that we just really haven't had to face until more recently. I think to our benefit, our services have become busier, but it's also created challenges where we now no longer have that scarcity of space availability, where now people are going, well, actually, we're now competing for space. There was a time when we were like, I know as a profession, we're going, anybody that can come in and book space, awesome. we want all these different users and programs to come in, where now it's like, oh, hold on, we're now trying to peel some time back because we know that we need to cross into this greater public benefit in order to justify our reasons for the services that we offer. And certainly, as we talked about a lot today, the cost of providing them. So in a nutshell, those are some of the things that we're grappling with. The report tries to identify the three that we think would make most sense to come back to the All-Rec Committee with some information on in September. So the first one is to look at what it would mean to adjust the allocation procedure timeline. We think that could create some leverage for us, and potentially, the idea is if we implemented some of these changes as they got adopted by the board, would be that we would then let them sit for a while and go, okay, now what challenges do we still have? If any of them kind of resolve themselves, or do we need to continue on? So one is the allocation procedure timeline. Two would be to define what public space is and establish a minimum public space commitment that we would add to our allocation procedure, and research allocating specific time and space for rentals to user groups, and ensuring public access continues to be maintained. So those are the three that we think make most sense, that we believe could provide the greatest leverage moving forward. I'm going to stop sharing, or attempt to stop sharing my screen when I figure that out. But in the meantime, maybe I'll just throw it open to Tia, Craig, or Joe, if there's anything I missed or you feel should be elaborated on before we throw it open for a question. Great. Over to Tia, Craig, online. Either of you have anything to add?
Through the chair, sorry, through the chair, this report, I think, is absolutely timely for where we're at right now, and a lot of work went into it, and I think it's really good recommendations. I think the one thing that we built the policy with the intention that if we reviewed the impact it's having with the board on a 2 or 3 year basis, but the procedures, as Tricia pointed out, with the feedback we've gotten from the user groups over the last couple of years, we're able to manage the changes to the procedures a little bit easier as staff versus the policy. And I just wanted to point that out. The procedures are a little bit more flexible than the policy. Let's put it that way.
Thank you. Tia, do you have anything to add?
Through the chair, just as Craig had said, making changes to the policy I don't think is quite necessary at this time. The procedural piece is the most important. I think, as pools are one of the more challenging spaces, there are the other spaces in our facilities that we can't ignore, like our arenas and even some of our field spaces at times. But I think it's very timely, and it is a priority for our staff to be working on this. And as we go through some of these priorities, we may be able to, before the next All-Rec, hit a few more of those in the meantime. So it may be more than just the three, but those are the three that we're going to be starting with, or that we'd like to.
Thank you. Okay, I have a list and I'll go through it. Director Vandenberg.
Yes, thank you, and through the chair. To be respectful of time, we're almost at noon here. This is a big item, and thank you to Tricia and I'm not surprised, the amount of work that's gone into it, the clarity that goes around it. I'm not quite clear as to what you want, what you're trying to get from us today in this short period. This is new. I've not had an opportunity to go through it and think it through. You're talking about a priority matrix. You have a list of challenges. If all you want to do is have us bless your 3 priority recommendations, the allocation procedure for timeline, define what public spaces are in the user group for rentals, go for it. Because otherwise I would defer this, because this is much bigger conversation that we could possibly have in 30 seconds and 3 minutes. So that's kind of my thought. Or shy of forming a working group, Tricia and Joe, you know that worked out very well. If that's helpful moving forward as well. But so if it's just the 3 priorities that you wish to work on and present to us later in September, I'd be happy to make that motion. We can't really get into this right now. We've not had a chance to really read it through and think it through.
Yeah, I think the goal, and staff can add anything I might miss, I think the goal is really to give context to why these recommendations were coming, that this is where they want to start. So I think that's the idea, is that they recognize it's too much information to digest all at once. And so here's the context to why they have 3 recommendations that they want to start with, and then we can start to chew it off as it goes. I think that's their intent, recognizing what you said, Director Vandenberg, is that it's too much information to solve all at one meeting. Am I correct in what you're looking for?
To use some previous lingo from the meeting, and Joe's favorite statement in the month of June is, we're not trying to bite off the elephant. It's literally just the toe in those 3 recommendations, and it's a start in working it, but also in working through these challenges. But it's also to give a bit of a state of the union related to the allocation challenges that exist within our spaces. So yes, just endorsement to move forward with those 3.
So supplemental, if I may, I would make that motion that those 3 priorities that have been identified by Tricia that I had just read out, be blessed and move forward with. Looking forward to what you come back with in September.
Great, moved by Director Vandenberg, seconded by Director Page. And I will continue on with my list. Director Main.
Yeah, thank you. This is just a small point in speaking to the item around a particular user group trying to book space in 2 different facilities. It's not always that they're being greedy. It's sometimes they're trying to create equity between of travel time between the users. I know when working with kids in sports, we try to use different fields at different times so that different families had the longer travel time. It was the same thing in my baseball days. We would use one field this week and the other field next week so that the travel time and access is shared more equally. So I just wanted to put that into the mix when you're considering those multiple space users. Thanks.
Great thoughts. Thank you, Director Main. Director Page.
That was it. I was just going to move the motion.
Excellent. Director Loughlin.
Thank you. I have 2 things. Director Main alluded to one of them, but on the application, is there any possible way to be able to help staff that there's a tick box that applying at multiple locations? So we don't need an answer, or I don't need an answer, but I just think that might help staff in that. The other thing that I'm not sure how many other communities have a pool, but Salmo is closed on Friday and Saturday right now. Hopefully we are having more. But is there opportunity to be having these groups? I know that we were sought after during COVID when there was no other pool open. And maybe that's what we need to do, is if we do have these user groups, is that we have limited space in whatever, but this is where we do have space. Don't like it?
Yes, so through the chair, that is exactly what happens at allocation. I can honestly say I haven't had a chance to sit through many of them, being we're still relatively new. I have another month to call myself that. But the time that I sat through it, Salmo Pool wouldn't have made sense because it was a different wrong time of year. But absolutely, we definitely show them. Here's all the different facilities. Here's where the crunches are. Here's some other opportunities. And definitely Salmo would be put in that mix for sure. Thank you.
I don't have anyone else on the list, and we are dropping like flies online. So I will call the question on those 3 recommendations going forward just for approval. All those in favor? Okay. No opposed? Great. Action 8 isn't really on the agenda, just so you're aware. You'll start to see these from staff. at the OREC. It's not for really discussion, it's just for information. If there's anything you want information on, contact staff after and they can give you more updates. It's really just for information so that we have some accountability on where different actions that come from this table are sitting at with them. Okay?
Actually, point of order to the chair. I would beg to disagree. The action list is something that is the opportunity for the group to ask questions about so that everybody understands where things are in terms of the work and the priority. If I may, I do have a question on one of those action items.
Sure, go right ahead.
Thank you. The second one, has the All-Rec Committee that has Director Tierney, Lockwood, and Hennegraaff, have they had a chance to meet yet to discuss the Trails and Water Access Strategy?
Yes. Yeah, we met. Don't ask me the date because I can't remember. But we met. That's where we had input and moved forward on that really long survey. You now know who to blame.
Thank you. Director Tierney asked me to ask that for him, so that's why I had to make my point on the action list, Madam Chair.
He was at the meeting. We haven't had one.
Yeah.
Just the messenger, don't shoot me.
Maybe he's wondering, I'm guessing he's wondering about the follow-up from what happened from the survey or the follow-up meeting is probably what he's wondering about. Because it says complete and it's probably what he's, yeah. That would be my guess is what is, is that it is being flagged. Okay.
So it was March 27th.
Yeah, and through the chair, the complete would just meant that the working group had been established.
Excellent. Any other clarity questions on those three action items? Great. Okay. Moving on to Director DeBoon. Did you want to make a motion for for a report for the next meeting? I put him in at the agenda when we adopted it there, and then adopted public.
Yeah, I would make that motion. I'm not entirely sure how to word the motion, but I would like a motion out of this. I think it's, we just need a staff report, I think, on the direction we're going with user groups because of the rising costs. And so, again, I'm not sure how to word that, but I would like some more information.
Okay, sure. I'm hearing from staff that the motion will be to bring back the fees and charges for discussion around how they make those decisions. Does that sound right, Director DeBoon?
I think we've done all the fees and charges, and I'm not sure if that's really what we need. We generally go over those yearly and frequently. I guess what I'm looking for is a way to, if there's any strategy we could put forward to perhaps decrease or stop the rapid increases, or find another way to support the user groups other than the charges that they see are constantly increasing. So again, I'm not exactly sure how we do that, but those are the concerns that I have had expressed to me, and I think others perhaps as well.
Through the chair, not exactly. So fees and charges, the reason that is the place where you determined as a board the subsidizations for groups. So that's why it would be staff suggestion is that's what you're talking about. There are, we can bring back maybe a more general report about other supports that are there. So for example, with the question that happened yesterday, I suggested that maybe you look at the Nelson Neptune Club site inside the region, which clearly indicated all the places that parents could go for further subsidization. I thought they did a good job of listing those resources out. But we could bring back something just to talk about that. Sorry, there's just a public member. Can you get that, Mark? I think somebody just wandered in through the wrong door. There we go. That's something that we can do. We have presented that in the past. The other piece that is there, just like that commission has just done, is the leisure access policy. So we can help maybe just try to link some of these things together that exist.
Yeah, I think what people are looking for, and I think we understand the balance between user fees and taxation and how difficult it is to tip the scales in one way or another. But I think what we're looking for is some way to assist these groups in the cost that's, as in the swim club, having to spend about $4,200 for a swim meet if you include the use of the curling rink for them to occupy a space because there's not enough space in the pool. So it becomes very expensive. And so if there are other ways to subsidize and assist them in these expenses, I think that would answer the questions better than us going back over fees and charges.
Okay, so I'm not sure, it sounds like from staff that they don't know what that would fall under, if it doesn't fall under fees and charges. So if you have a specific motion that you would like to put on the table, we can do that. If not, I'm hearing from staff that their only thought to discuss that would be the fees and charges. So do you have a different motion you'd like to put on, or do you want to take it offline and see if we can figure out something with staff, or what are you thinking?
I think we'll take it offline, and in the interest of getting this meeting done, I definitely want to take it offline. So I will email Joe, and perhaps we'll come up with something.
Yeah,
great.
Thanks, Arnold.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving into public time. We have no one in house, but we do have a couple online. So public time, this is your time to discuss with us, have questions about the rec commission specifically. Please be respectful and kind, or we will mute you. And I go to those online. If you want to unmute, you can ask your question. I'm not seeing any questions or hearing any. So on that, next meeting is scheduled for September 25th at 9 a.m. That doesn't conflict with UBCM, does it? Okay, good. I have my calendar open. So I'm just making sure so we don't put a meeting on that conflicts with something else. Great, and I call for adjournment. Moved. All those in favor? Excellent. Thank you, everyone online. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Hands, if you could just remain, we won't close the meeting, but just like